Gradually, the Zone Consortium's troops set up blockades along several traffic arteries, even mounting heavy machine guns at many key spots. The western part of Stronghold 146 had turned into a cage. Ren Xiaosu narrowed his eyes and sprinted. He tried breaking through two defensive lines of fire, but the problem was that there seemed to be an endless stream of Zone Consortium soldiers remining the positions. All people would get exhausted no matter what. Even Ren Xiaosu, who had a strong level of fitness, would get tired as well. However, the Zone Consortium's troops were also at a loss. The platoons who had not encountered Ren Xiaosu yet were terrified because they realized most of the troops on the radio that encountered him were dead. Was the enemy really human? But when Ren Xiaosu found himself getting lost on the streets, a manhole cover on the ground was suddenly pushed aside by someone underneath it. Ren Xiaosu found the sight to be extremely familiar. The person in the manhole waved wildly at him. Here! Over here! Ren Xiaosu jumped straight down. But the moment he got into the sewers, he grabbed the person by the neck. Who are you? The grip on the man's neck was so strong his face reddened. Boss Luo wanted me to bring you a message. What message? Ren Xiaosu lifted him effortlessly. He said that you had better not die. If you want to die, make sure to leave some black medicine for him. Ren Xiaosu was so annoyed he laughed. Which way do we go? Left, go left. Ren Xiaosu confiscated the person's weapons and went left all the way. It was not that he was returning kindness with enmity, but that he had to be extremely cautious at this moment. Who could know if this fellow were sent by the Zone Consortium to trick him on purpose? The man did not get angry even though he was being carried around like that. Mr. Qing Zhen told me that you'd definitely come to Stronghold 146 someday. That was why he asked me to help you when I saw you. However, I really did not expect that you would cause such a big commotion. Oh? Did I cause a big commotion? Ren Xiaosu said absent-mindedly. Is that not big enough of a commotion? The man said with a wry smile, currently, the higher UPS of the Zone Consortium living in the stronghold feel unsafe as they're afraid you'll kill them if they drop their guard. Before I came to pick you up, you killed several hundred of the stronghold's garrison troops, didn't you? Even though the buildings provided you with cover as you took on the brigade by yourself, you're still the most fearsome person I've come across in my life. You might as well be called the god of war. Ren Xiaosu's eyebrows twitched. This guy was really good at flattery. However, it seemed that this person also held a rather high position in the Zone Consortium since he knew so much. How else could he be so knowledgeable about the higher UPS? He asked the spy, where does the left lead? We have to get out of their perimeter first. The spy said, I've already prepared a safe house for you where you can wait for things to die down. I don't have time to wait any longer. Ren Xiaosu said, tell me, where are those Zone Consortium higher UPS? The Qing Consortium spy who was being carried around turned anxious and said, the Zone Consortium's higher UPS? You still think you can kill all of them at this point? There'll be at least half a brigade of soldiers guarding them while the other half tries to capture you. Do you really think you're a god? Ren Xiaosu fell silent. Noticing no response, the Qing Consortium spy said with a wry smile, what's more, the Zone Consortium higher UPS are all currently scattered across the stronghold. Once you kill any of them, the entire stronghold's forces will descend upon you again. At that time, I won't be able to get you out of their perimeter again. Mr. Qing Zhen said I could prioritize my own life over the mission. As Ren Xiaosu listened to him speak, he continued walking without saying a word. Then he asked, which direction leads to the garrison base? The Qing Consortium spy gasped. Are you thinking of attacking their base while it's empty? What was at the garrison base? There were ammunition depots, and the strategic headquarters was located within it as well. Even if Zhong Cheng were not there, he could still cause some trouble to the garrison brigade of Stronghold 146 by killing some of their staff officers and commanders. Ren Xiaosu understood this might not be the most important thing he should be doing, but attacking the enemy's weak point was still his best option right now. Who could have thought he would be so bold as to venture into the enemy's garrison base by himself? No matter how brave someone might be, they wouldn't do something like that, right? Ren Xiaosu understood that he might only get a chance if he could create enough chaos to make the Zone Consortium's troops constantly run about. He was running out of time. The Zone Consortium's troops would probably cross the Goba soon and arrive at Fortress 178. The only way to make Zone Cheng recall them was to hit them hard here. Time waited for no man. However, the spy rambled, even if the base is almost defenseless, there are still at least 500 troops stationed there. If you go, you'll be committing suicide. Which way? Turn right up ahead. Ren Xiaosu took out 6 vials of black medicine and stuffed them into the spy's hands as they walked. He did not have time to repack the black medicine, so he gave them directly to the spy after trading for them in the palace. Thank you, Ren Xiaosu said. The spy said happily, hee, don't mention it. Put me down after we get up close. I know how to find my way back. With the black medicine in hand, Boss Luo would definitely reward him handsomely when he got back to the Qing Consortium. He would have almost nothing to worry about for the rest of his life. Putting everything else aside, Mr. Qing Zhen and Boss Luo would never treat their loyal servants badly. Ren Xiaosu thanked the spy as he had risked his life to rescue him. This was despite the fact that he had not used his trump card yet, and it would still prove very difficult for the Zone Consortium brigade to encircle and trap him. But if he sustained an injury while breaking through the encirclement, and if the enemy used hounds to chase after him, that would only make his next plans harder to carry out. Moreover, the spy had taken a great risk in the circumstances. Since the spy was willing to risk his life to rescue him, he would bear it in mind. After walking for a dozen kilometers and taking many turns, the spy said with great familiarity, "Here we are, the Zone Consortium's garrison base is right in front of us. Although the sewers also pass underneath the base, the center is reinforced with rebar grates, and there's no way to get through them. You'll have to figure out how to get in yourself." Ren Xiaosu nodded and finally put him back on the ground. "Go back and tell Fatty Luo and Qing Zhen that I'll repay them in the future." As of today, the brothers no longer owed him any more favors. Instead, it was Ren Xiaosu who owed Qing Zhen and Luo Lan a great big favor. Whether it be the help the Qing Consortium gave to capture the Buin River, or the spy they sent who risked his life to assist him, Ren Xiaosu could no longer ignore these two brothers. A moment later, the spy saw Ren Xiaosu draw a black saber out of thin air. He started slashing, and he cut through the rebar grating in front of him like it was paper. The Qing Consortium spy's jaw dropped. So it turned out the area he couldn't get into was no obstacle for Ren Xiaosu at all. Come to think of it, he was someone who fucking dared to take on a brigade by himself. Before Ren Xiaosu proceeded any further, he looked back at the spy and asked, "Friend, what's your name?" "Zheng Yuandong," the spy said. "I'll remember you." Then Ren Xiaosu turned around and walked into the darkness. However, it started turning back into a wasteland after many years of neglect. Actually, not many people cared whether this place would revert back into a desert. More importantly, this disappearing oasis had presented the Zone Consortium with a final opportunity to achieve their ambitions. The Zone Consortium's higher UPS termed this Heaven's Route as it was an opportunity given by the heavens for them to usurp Fortress 178. The Zone Consortium had not been preparing for nothing over the past few years. If they did not have a contingency plan like this, they would not have dared to poke at Fortress 178 so much in recent years. "We'll arrive at South Lake soon. After we pass there, we'll stop for a 2-hour reorganization before heading straight for Fortress 178. The Zone Consortium's general said delightedly to his deputy commander next to him, "In this war, we'll be the ones to get recognized for our outstanding contributions. Without our painstaking planning all these years, and our crossing of the Gobi to deal a fatal blow to Fortress 178, we'd probably only have a very slim chance of winning. Sir, you really are wise, the adjutant laughed reservedly. When he laughed, he ended up eating a mouthful of sand. They had been traveling in the Gobi for several days already. Even with the cover of the oasis that was disappearing, it was still a very tough journey to make. But no matter how much they were suffering in these moments, it would still be worth it. They would definitely go down in the annals of history. The Zone Consortium's general said in high spirits, "This battle will be a good opportunity for us to make a name for ourselves." As the mechanized infantry in the rear continued to roll over the hard ground, it swept up a large cloud of sand and dust in the desert. When the Zone Consortium's general listened to the sound of the armored vehicles moving across the gravel road, he found it extremely sonorous and pleasant. He asked his adjutant, "Notice anything unusual? This is a critical period, so we have to be even more careful." "Don't worry," the adjutant said, "we've become so familiar with this place over the years, and Fortress 178 doesn't have any military facilities in the Gobi at all, so how would those damn fucks know we are?" But a moment later, they heard an ear-piercing noise approach them. These combat troops were the Zone Consortium's most elite fighting force, and the soldiers were the highest quality in the military. So when the ear-piercing noise screeched, all of them were horrified. It was the sound of missiles flying through the air and heading towards them. "We're under attack! We're under attack!" A few loud explosions boomed as several missiles landed on their column. Suddenly, the Zone Consortium's troops were enveloped in a large cloud of dust and smoke. The Zone Consortium's general was already prone. He did not understand why a group of soldiers from Fortress 178 was lying in ambush here. As he lay on the ground, he had a quick look around at his surroundings. When the dust and smoke dissipated slightly, he saw black dots appearing on the horizon in 3 directions. Fortress 178 had come prepared. The Zone Consortium's general was surprised when he realized they had actually walked right into Fortress 178's trap that wrapped them up into a bag. The incoming mechanized infantry of Fortress 178 swept up a huge cloud of smoke and dust on the road. The Zone Consortium's general immediately ordered his troops to launch a counterattack. But when an artillery shell flew towards their enemy, a black cauldron suddenly appeared in front of the targeted troops and blocked it. However, that huge black cauldron did not stay put there. It flew around in the air and blocked another 5 or 6 artillery shells in succession. It was very difficult to even catch a glimpse of a flying missile with the naked eye, yet all of the artillery shells were blocked one after another. When the artillery shells impacted against the black cauldron, they exploded. Once the wind blew, the grey smoke from the explosion dissipated immediately. Many of the Zone Consortium soldiers were stunned. What the fuck was that? Su Xianchu. The Zone Consortium's general was bewildered. How can Su Xianchu possibly be here? Isn't he at the rear of our zone territory? Didn't someone report that they spotted his shadow back there? Someone in the Zone Consortium headquarters had mentioned this. They said that Su Xianchu had disappeared from the battlefield, and it seemed like Zhang Jinglan had made some other arrangements for him. It was likely that Zhang Jinglan had seen through their intentions and sent Su Xianchu to stop their advance through the Gobi. But when someone suddenly relayed some new intel with claims that Su Xianchu was seen with that company in their rear displaying his superpower, they were relieved. But the Zone Consortium general in the Gobi could never have expected that Su Xianchu would suddenly appear in front of him like magic. Did this Su Xianchu know how to fly? At the same time, Su Xianchu, who had just blocked the artillery shells from landing, was clamoring for war at the rear of the troops. Attack without mercy and surround them from 3 directions. We may let this zone general slip away, but their troops must be destroyed here in the Gobi. Charge! When the soldiers of Fortress 178 witnessed for themselves that their commanding officer could even block artillery shells, their morale gained a huge boost. However, Su Xianchu was just putting on a brave front at this moment and doing his best to hold on. It was obvious that he was experiencing pain all over his body from the backlash transmitted by the Black Cauldron. In fact, it was nearly not tough enough to withstand the force of the artillery bombardment. But he knew well that whether Stronghold 178 could win the war all depended on whether his army could score a beautiful and resounding victory here. Su Xianchu had been lying in ambush here for nearly a month now, and all of the men from Fortress 178 were stretched to their limits. However, was Fortress 178 able to stand intact in the northwest for so long because of how well equipped they were? No. So was it because one of their troops was worth 100 of the enemy's? It was not that either. It was because they could endure hardships more than any other troops in the world. It was because they treated hardship as a routine while living in the harsh northwestern frontier. This was going to be a vicious battle where their final strategies were revealed. Zhang Jinglin just received news from Su Xianchu's troops that they were exchanging fire with the enemy. Because of the surprise, the ambush troops of Fortress 178 had gained the upper hand. Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jinglin. Will Ren Xiaosu blame us? It was obvious what Wang Fengyuan was getting at. Actually, with this contingency plan, the Zone Consortium's trump card would be easily staved off as long as they stepped into the trap Fortress 178 had set up. Once that happened, Fortress 178 would no longer be in an as perilous situation as they were expecting. There hadn't actually been a need for Ren Xiaosu to head to Stronghold 146 at all. When Zhang Xiaoman called them the other day, Ren Xiaosu had volunteered to head to Stronghold 146 to take out their board members. Zhang Jinglin had wanted to stop him, but he could not reveal his plan. Back then, Zhang Jinglin and Wang Fengyuan were thoroughly investigating the issue of the spy. Even though they knew there was a spy among the commanders, they did not manage to discover who it was. So to ensure their plans would not be leaked to the Zone Consortium, Zhang Jinglin could not talk about their plans to the razor-sharp company at that time. During that call, any details that were brought up could easily get caught by the spy. As such, Zhang Jinglin decided he could not let the soldiers of Fortress 178 bear such a risk. It was also at this time that they locked onto Li Xiang as a suspect. When Li Xiang went to eat, he would pretend to casually ask Lin Yuz, the manager of the Chow Hall, how has the commander's appetite been recently? As an infantry brigade commander, Li Xiang was not authorized to participate in the drafting of battle plans. So he could only use Zhang Jinglin's appetite to gauge whether Fortress 178 had any contingency plans. This was because it was known to everyone in Fortress 178 that Commander Zhang's appetite would drop whenever he was troubled. If the spy were not caught, that plan could only remain hidden in his head. But Zhang Jinglin knew that if he did not reveal his plan, he would not be able to stop Ren Xiaosu. By the time the spy was caught, Ren Xiaosu had already split from the razor-sharp company and could no longer be contacted. Therefore, Wang Fengyuan immediately consulted with Zhang Jinglin on Ren Xiaosu after they caught the spy. But it was too late by then. Zhang Jinglin could only hope that Ren Xiaosu would survive by himself. Wang Fengyuan whispered, "Fortunately, he got the razor-sharp company somewhere safe. Otherwise, this would have weighed on my conscience for the rest of my life if those glorious troops had gotten wiped out." "That was expected of him," Zhang Jinglin said calmly. Zhang Jinglin knew this deep down. The moment Ren Xiaosu decided to head to Stronghold 146, he would definitely have arranged for the razor-sharp company to be placed somewhere safe. This was just like how the young man had arranged for Li Xiaoyu and Yan Liuyuan to stay at the town school back then. Zhang Jinglin understood this young man very well. Just as expected, Ren Xiaosu went to Stronghold 146 alone. Meanwhile, Wang Fengyuan had received reliable intel from their spy hiding in a residential building that the garrison troops of Stronghold 146 were conducting a citywide search for Ren Xiaosu. However, Ren Xiaosu had fought his way out of the predicament and was nowhere to be found. Zhang Jinglin looked at Wang Fengyuan and said calmly, "Even if he blames me, I'll still accept it. I have my duty to uphold, so I can't be indecisive. Zhang Jinglan had a clear picture of what his priorities were when it came down to Ren Xiaosu and everyone else at Fortress 178. Wang Fengyuan was stunned. He was worried if this would estrange the young man from Fortress 178. When Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jinglan, he realized he was not as calm as he had claimed. It was just that he was pretending to fool the spy. Now, he was really worried. The battle in the Gobi did not end that quickly. The Zone Consortium troops who were tasked with crossing the Gobi were extremely tough soldiers. Even though they had been ambushed, they were still able to immediately form a strong defensive line to fight back and retreat at the same time. This mission was the Zone Consortium's entire hope for the war. Therefore, every soldier here not only had to go through a strict political assessment but also undergo extremely tough military training as well. But Su Xianchu was not surprised by that, as he already knew what kinds of troops he would be facing. Actually, there were still some flaws with Fortress 178's plans. For example, would the absence of a key supernatural being from the main battlefield like Su Xianchu impact their plans negatively? However, Zhang Jinglan was left with no other choice. Su Xianchu's mastery of command in small-scale military operations, as well as the application of his superpower in a small-scale engagement's attack and defense, were outstanding. Therefore, Su Xianchu was definitely the best candidate to command the ambush troops in the Gobi. But what Zhang Jinglan and Su Xianchu had not expected was how Ren Xiaosu had helped to plug that gap. Of course, it remained to be seen whether Su Xianchu would feel grateful to Ren Xiaosu after he found out. The battle in the Gobi continued. The Zone Consortium had waited too long for this day, and so had Zhang Jinglan. But if the Zone Consortium was staking everything on the Gobi mission as their final resort to turn the tables, it could only be said that they had made the wrong decision. Actually, Fortress 178 had already gotten closer to winning the war now that it had progressed to here. After Zhang Jinglan's plan to catch the Zone Consortium in their own trap was completed, Fortress 178 suddenly made significant progress in the battle at Mt Wuchuan. When they were previously trying to capture the summits, Fortress 178 had faced tough battles. At that time, the Zone Consortium generals were even thinking that Fortress 178's troops did not seem so tough after all. Actually, Fortress 178's weapons and equipment were not as good as what the Zone Consortium had. Moreover, the Zone Consortium outnumbered Fortress 178 by more than 2 to 1. However, the Zone Consortium generals consciously chose to ignore those conditions and felt that as long as they could defeat Fortress 178, it would show that they were more powerful than them. But in that raging storm of a battle, the Zone Consortium suddenly realized the Fortress 178 troops were seemingly undefeatable. No matter how many troops they piled on them, Fortress 178's soldiers who were stretched to their limits were still able to go a little further. Even though some of the positions had changed hands many times, the actual duration it took Fortress 178 to win back a position was only 2 to 4 hours. Meanwhile, it might take up to a full day and night for the Zone Consortium to win it back from Fortress 178. There were clearly far fewer Fortress 178 troops on the battlefield, but even when the Zone Consortium troops barely managed to win back a position, they would find some of the enemy soldiers pretending to be dead while clutching explosives in their arms just so they could perish together with the Zone Consortium soldiers. This kind of war with no end in sight was like fighting an enemy that could never be defeated. Just the thought of it would terrify anyone. After the successful ambush of the Zone Consortium troops in the Gobi, Zhang Jinglan immediately ordered the mechanized infantry that were reorganizing themselves to fully deploy onto the battlefield. Zhou Yinglong had fought hard to open up safe passage for them to proceed. These mechanized infantry would deal the Zone Consortium troops a fatal blow. It would be the straw that broke the camel's back. And surprising many people, the pontoon bridge on the Blackstone River had been rebuilt in just 3 days. Originally, they had estimated it would take 15 days before the mechanized infantry could cross again. When Zhou Yinglong went for a break in the rear, he even fell asleep on his meal tray while eating. The medics in the rear quickly carried him away. After cutting open his uniform with scissors, they realized the newly promoted brigade commander had sustained tiny wounds all over his body. There were 2 pieces of shrapnel stuck in his thigh that weren't removed until now. The nurse cleaning his wounds was shocked when she saw his injuries. There was another nurse working in the temporary medical center who was the wife of one of the troops. She looked at her husband's wounds and scolded him tearfully for being careless while bandaging it. The soldier said impatiently, "Can't you stop crying? I have to rejoin my squad after you're done bandaging my wounds. We're the ones who took those positions. Now that we're close to victory, I can't let those lil bastards claim all the credit. Get lost then, go claim your credit. I'll settle the score with you when we get home." After the nurse tied a bow knot to finish off the bandage, she chased her husband off tearfully. At this moment, Wang Fengyuan came into the chow hall with his meal tray. Lin Yuz, the manager of the chow hall, asked proudly while serving him, "How was my acting?" "It was perfect." Wang Fengyuan laughed heartily. "The commander told me it was all thanks to you that we caught Li Xiang this time. Hehe, I've been paying close attention since that bastard sneakily asked me about the commander's appetite." Lin Yu said as he scooped up a large ladle of meat for Wang Fengyuan, "But still, it was all thanks to your subsequent actions. Otherwise, we could only have remained suspicious of that person. There's no need to be humble." Wang Fengyuan shook his head. "After all, we only knew who to investigate after he displayed some unusual behavior." At this moment, a large group of commanders gathered around Wang Fengyuan. "You asshole, you must have known about the commander's plan from the start, right? Why were you so tight-lipped? You didn't tell us anything at all." Wang Fengyuan snapped, "What if any of you turned out to be spies? Even now, I still suspect there's a spy among you people." The commanders around him got annoyed for a while. But as they were used to Wang Fengyuan's manner of speaking, they never took it personally since a long time ago. When Wang Fengyuan was flushing out the spy, his methods were brutal and he did not give a damn about anyone. He was only answerable to Zhang Jinglin. Even back at Fortress 178, Wang Fengyuan lived in seclusion every day and never had a drop of alcohol. Wang Fengyuan used to have a wife, but there was one night when she overheard him talking in his sleep. It turned out Wang Fengyuan was also a very ruthless person. He actually separated from his wife right after that and only occasionally visited his child during the day. At that time, Wang Fengyuan's child just got born. Whenever he went to visit his child after that, the child would only address him as uncle. However, Wang Fengyuan never once complained no matter how unbearable it felt and spent his life in seclusion for over a decade. When his subordinates sometimes saw Wang Fengyuan smoking alone outside the office, they always felt that he had a lot of things weighing on his mind. Next to him, Chais Hailong, who was the commander of an infantry brigade, asked, "Fengyuan, since it's no longer a secret, why don't you share with us what happened? We were all worried when Commander Zhang stopped eating for 2 days." Wang Fengyuan smiled ambiguously at them. "I think there's no harm in sharing it with y'all now since the commander's given me permission to talk about it." Sharing their victorious exploits at this moment would surely boost the morale of the troops. When someone heard that Wang Fengyuan was willing to share, they said excitedly, "Tell us, did the commander really go hungry for 2 days? Didn't y'all have Lin Yu serve him some food secretly?" Wang Fengyuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect this group of people to actually be concerned about this matter instead. He said, "Who said that the commander's appetite gets affected whenever he's troubled?" The commanders looked at one another. "That's not true." Wang Fengyuan smiled. The other commanders suddenly realized the rumor was a trap. For example, by letting an opponent think that you had the habit of touching your nose when you were bluffing in 3-card brag, you could fake a tell to lure your opponent into a trap and deal them the fatal blow. Of course, that was only the most basic example. The rumors of Zhang Jinglan having no appetite whenever he was troubled had been circulating in the stronghold for nearly 20 years. However, that was proven to be false today. Wang Fengyuan said, when the commander is really troubled, he'll smoke more than 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That much is true. However, Chai's Hailong, who was next to him, pointed at Wang Fengyuan and chided him jokingly, "You're fucking laying a trap for us, right? When I was serving as an orderly for the commander, he could also smoke 2 packs of cigarettes if he was in a good mood." Wang Fengyuan raised his eyebrows. "You've revealed the commander's personal habits without permission. Go and pen a 3,000 word-long apology letter." Chai's Hailong's expression immediately changed. "But I never said anything." Wang Fengyuan ignored his protest. Rules were rules. Chai's Hailong pulled a long face. Reveling in schadenfreude, someone patted Chai's Hailong on the shoulder, then turned to ask Wang Fengyuan, "Tell us then, how did Commander Zhang discover that the Zone Consortium was planning to use the Gobi to get to Fortress 178? Hasn't Commander Zhang been away from the fortress for more than a decade? Didn't he only just return? Besides, no one at Fortress 178 has mentioned something like that before." Wang Fengyuan sneered. The plan itself was given to the Zone Consortium by Commander Zhang several years ago. When the Zone Consortium began provoking us more frequently, Commander Zhang guessed their FOB in the Gobi had most likely finished construction. That was when he decided to come back. The commanders realized Commander Zhang had not been idle outside either. Everyone turned their gaze to Wang Fengyuan again. So it turned out Wang Fengyuan must have been keeping in touch with Commander Zhang ever since he secretly left Fortress 178. However, this bastard was so tight-lipped the others were totally unaware. "Bastard, I didn't expect you to be so good at bluffing when you're so terrible at intelligence gathering," Chai's Hailong muttered. Chai's Hailong stunned himself. "Wait a minute. Wang Fengyuan had been the intelligence director for over a decade now and was always complaining to others about how difficult it was to gather intelligence. Although he also started making some progress in recent years, no one knew exactly what progress he had made. Everyone would always make fun of Wang Fengyuan in private, saying the intelligence agency of Fortress 178 was where one waited for retirement. But today, it seemed that Wang Fengyuan and Commander Zhang were really the prescient people. If Wang Fengyuan was not capable, wouldn't Commander Zhang have removed him from his post long ago? How could Commander Zhang be so careless in his duties? When they thought of this, everyone started seeing Wang Fengyuan in a different light. So it seemed that even the Zone Consortium's plan to cross the Gobi was leaked by Zhang Jinglan to them? Could it be that Commander Zhang had intended to destroy the Zone Consortium for a long time? But Commander Zhang had still not returned to Fortress 178 at that time, right? So was Wang Fengyuan responsible for all this? When did that happen? Someone asked. Wang Fengyuan thought back and replied, "I don't remember." The commanders around him scowled. "As if you would fucking forget. Like hell we'd believe that." But then a commander asked about something unrelated. "Fengyuan, you must have known there was someone like Ren Xiaosu, right? Tell us more." Wang Fengyuan thought for a moment. "I still can't talk about it. Is it because he's not gotten out of danger yet? I heard he went to Stronghold 146 by himself. Is it true?" Chai's Hailong asked. Yes. Wang Fengyuan did not hide this from them. After all, the Zone Consortium knew about this as well. Chai's Hailong muttered, "That kid is way too fierce. He even dares to go to Stronghold 146 by himself? Then what's he doing now? Did you get our agent in the north to give him some help?" Wang Fengyuan shook his head. "I can't say. He had already said all that he could say. The rest of the information would have to be kept secret." The commanders around Wang Fengyuan dispersed. They also needed to reorganize themselves as quickly as possible since they were still required to fight on the northern front. After all, even though they were close to victory today, they still had not captured any of the Zone Consortium's strongholds. Since he could not just climb up there, he could only estimate the number of garrison troops remaining in the base based on the movements above his head. He needed to do this so he could find a good opportunity to take action. Through his careful observation, Ren Xiaosu realized the soldiers here still maintained an extremely strict patrolling routine even when the rest of the troops were conducting a citywide search for him. Approximately every 5 minutes or so, a platoon would walk past overhead. The margin of error in their timing did not exceed 10 seconds. Sometimes, light from spotlights outside would seep in through the 2 holes on the manhole cover and illuminate Ren Xiaosu's face. Ren Xiaosu cautiously found a manhole cover where the patrols seldom passed by and got a bold idea. The manhole cover above his head was welded shut, leaving only 2 holes for drainage purposes. If it were anyone else who had infiltrated into this place, they would definitely be driven to despair. It was no wonder the Qing Consortium spy from earlier had not even thought about infiltrating the military base through the sewer system. Fatty Luo's trusted method for escape and concealment back at the Li Consortium did not seem like it would work in this military base. But not even this was enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. He did possess the black saber, after all. It was precisely because the defense here was the tightest that he chose to break in from here to get above ground. This was because even the Zone Consortium soldiers would not expect someone to break in quietly through the manhole covers since they were welded shut, especially when the sewer system was reinforced with rebar grating. Ren Xiaosu started to slowly and effortlessly cut open the manhole cover with his black saber. Then he waited in silence. Suddenly, he heard footsteps slowly approaching the manhole cover he was under. When the enemy passed by, Ren Xiaosu flipped open the manhole cover quietly and leaped out. He pounced onto the enemy like a cheetah. Before the spotlights could sweep across again, he had already broken the neck of his enemy and dragged the corpse into the sewers, closing the manhole cover after him. His shadow clone had assisted him throughout the entire process. After the manhole cover was closed, it went all quiet again above ground as though nothing had happened. Ren Xiaosu had a quick look at his surroundings when he was above ground just now. His current position was at the edge of the base. Most of the buildings here consisted of 1-story barracks, but there was a narrow 5-story tower that stood out from among the structures. Could that be the administrative building of the garrison troops' headquarters? Ren Xiaosu mentally estimated that he was around 200 meters away from the tower. Ren Xiaosu made a decision. Although he had not yet seen where the ammunition depots of Garrison 146 were, he knew he should set his sights on that narrow tower if he wanted to destroy the central command of these troops. Right now, Ren Xiaosu needed to get a change of clothes. Only by changing into the Zone Consortium's khaki uniform could he minimize his chances of being suspected. Even if it could make the enemy hesitate for only 0.1 seconds, that would still be worth it. Sometimes, that 0.1 second reaction time could determine the difference between life and death. He quickly took the uniform off of the Zone Consortium soldier he had just killed and happily prepared to change into it. He did not even use the black saber earlier because he was worried the clothes would get stained with blood. But Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Not for any other reason but because he realized the enemy was a little too short and his uniform was too small. Ren Xiaosu was 18 years old and a supernatural being as well. He had grown from his original height of 178 centimeters at the age of 17 to 184 centimeters. This was considered very tall even among males, especially in an era where malnutrition was prevalent. This meant it might not be easy to find the right size of uniform. But Ren Xiaosu was not someone who was easily discouraged. Since the plan was still feasible, he would have to find a way to execute it no matter what. However, he would have to act quickly. Once the Zone Consortium discovered that a soldier had gone missing, his plan would have more or less failed. When he grabbed a second Zone Consortium soldier, Ren Xiaosu frowned again and let out a sigh. No. This soldier is still too short. And the third soldier Ren Xiaosu grabbed, no. This one's too big. This soldier's uniform made Ren Xiaosu look like he had put on a costume. Although Ren Xiaosu was built, his physique was still thin because his strength and agility were evenly balanced. Ren Xiaosu was not expecting much anymore, but when he caught the fourth person, he saw a glimmer of hope in his plan. The size of this person is just right this time. Phew! Ren Xiaosu finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was worried he would end up capturing and bringing all of the soldiers in this base down into the sewers he was hiding in. But at this moment, an alarm blared in the garrison base. It seemed the missing personnel had already attracted the attention of the Zone Consortium garrison troops. Ren Xiaosu quickly got changed and took the soldier's access card before climbing out of the sewers. Then he walked to the tower as casually as he could. The patrolling platoons that were on rotational break quickly reassembled at the barracks. Immediately, an even more rigorous search team armed with live ammunition was formed. Troops were relaying the orders as they passed each other. We have some soldiers who went missing. Search every corner of the base immediately. Conduct a blanket search and follow up on any tracks that are found. The enemy might have already infiltrated our base. Ren Xiaosu felt these Zone Consortium troops were really quite alert. But it was not a big problem as he had already gone into the tower he identified earlier. The tower was illuminated with incandescent white lights inside. When Ren Xiaosu was about to swipe his access card to pass through the security entrance, the guard outside eyed him suspiciously as though he found this person a little unfamiliar. "Sir, please show me your ID." Ren Xiaosu tried to bluff his way through. He looked at the guard and said calmly, "You don't know me? Can you say you recognize every soldier in the base?" The guard replied earnestly, "Well, sir, it's true that I can't recognize every soldier in our brigade, but I can still recognize the regimental commanders when there's so few of them." Ren Xiaosu was slightly taken aback. Did he kill yet another regimental commander? He had not even gone through boot camp before, so how could he know how to recognize the Zone Consortium's military ranks? Moreover, the regimental commander he killed was also wearing a standard combat uniform like the rest of the soldiers. It was just that there was a slightly different insignia on his collar. So he thought it was just an ordinary officer like a platoon commander or a non-commissioned officer with an appointment. However, he did not expect it to be a regimental commander. A second later, Ren Xiaosu gave a mental sigh. For such tightly guarded places, it seemed it would really be impossible to sneak past the defenses. It was not that his plan was unfeasible but that the enemy's security was too tight. Since he could not sneak in, he would just have to kill his way in. Ren Xiaosu suddenly made his move. Before the guard could react, Ren Xiaosu landed a knife hand strike onto his opponent's neck. The strike whooshed through the air. The guard collapsed onto the ground lifelessly. Ren Xiaosu looked up at the surveillance camera and knew that from this moment on, the soldiers in the entire base would start pursuing him with all their might. But before that happened, Ren Xiaosu would first cripple the military's central command in this tower. He would rather face a defenseless base than head out to the stronghold to face the massive search force. He was only hoping that his arrival would send Stronghold 146 spiraling into chaos. Only amid the chaos would he have a glimmer of hope to clinch victory. At that time, the person who brought up the matter said, "My brother-in-law is a regimental commander in the garrison 146 troops. He was the one who told me about it." However, many of those he told did not believe it and felt he was just bragging. They said that if his brother-in-law were a regimental commander, then their father would be the brigade commander. After all, the situation was so chaotic that everyone was getting extremely unsettled, and it felt like the war was starting to affect the people in Stronghold 146. As such, no one really took that young man's words seriously. After all, who would believe that a brigade could not even deal with a lone enemy who had entered the stronghold? But at this moment, they were finally a little convinced after hearing the ear-piercing alarm. The young man had not only escaped the pursuit of the garrison troops in the daytime, he was even bold enough to attack the base of the Zone Consortium's garrison. After Ren Xiaosu killed the guard at the entrance, he immediately headed upstairs armed with his black saber. When someone saw him kill the guard through the surveillance camera, they rushed down. The alarm in the tower blared as well. All of a sudden, a commotion broke out in the administrative building. Two of the soldiers who rushed down had their guards up in the stairway. They had seen clearly through the surveillance camera how unbelievably skilled the enemy was. When the enemy took out the guard earlier, he even smashed the brick wall beside him at the same time. But before they could even come face to face with Ren Xiaosu, they saw a hand reach out of a shadow cast by the stairway's handrail. It then dropped a grenade at their feet. An explosion blasted in the tower. Ren Xiaosu did not have time to tussle with these Zone Consortium soldiers who were hiding in the shadows and trying to shoot him. It would be too troublesome if the enemy's troops managed to group up and surround the tower. The troops in the tower all rushed down, with some of them adopting a defensive formation in the stairways and corners while they waited quietly for Ren Xiaosu to show up. However, this method would only be effective when dealing with normal enemies. Against Ren Xiaosu, that was too passive a tactic. Ren Xiaosu was rapidly taking down the enemy troops one by one. The soldier in the control room who was in charge of monitoring and reporting Ren Xiaosu's movements could only watch as he ran through the corridors like a ghostly presence, and his every move was also ferocious like a beast's. Through the surveillance feed, he watched an officer rush out of a room holding a pistol. But the moment he stepped out of the room, a black saber slashed onto his shoulder and his arm fell onto the ground together with the gun. Right after, the young man kicked the officer so forcefully his entire body was mangled. How much strength would he need to be able to do that? The bones in a human body were extremely tough. As grenades exploded one after another, the soldier in the control room saw the security monitors turning black one by one. However, he could do nothing to stop the young man's advance. Every few seconds, a security monitor would either go black or turn into static. The soldier in the control room suddenly felt like he was watching a paranormal movie. Such scenes would usually take place right before the appearance of a ghost as it slowly wrung the fear out of its victim's heart until it bled. Earlier in the day, this soldier had heard about how his fellow comrades of the search party were unable to apprehend the wanted criminal. When everyone was eating in the chow hall, they even made fun of their comrades outside the base for being too weak and unable to capture a single person. But when he saw with his own eyes how fearsome the enemy was, he understood what havoc a person like him could cause in the stronghold city by relying on the blind spots the buildings provided. Without intense firepower suppressing him, no one could do anything. This young man was practically invincible in the smaller battles, so it required the deployment of a much larger force to kill him. Wait a minute. The enemy had already moved too. The soldier in the control room was startled. He picked up his gun and looked behind him only to see the locked door of the control room being slashed open right at this moment. That black saber left a terrifying crack in the steel door, and the soldier inside was met by Ren Xiaosu's cold stare through it. He was so nervous with keeping his eye on the security monitors that he forgot the enemy had already arrived at the control room's doorstep. The soldier was scared out of his wits even though he only saw part of the enemy's face through the crack. After slashing through the closed steel door, Ren Xiaosu did not even bother to enter when he saw there was only one person inside. He just threw a grenade in through the crack before he continued moving forward. Ren Xiaosu used to use the grenades sparingly as he had very few of them on hand. But when he led the Razor Sharp Company to destroy 3 military factories some time ago, they seized so many grenades it was unimaginable for Ren Xiaosu. Right now, even he was unsure of how many grenades he had exactly. No one from the Razor Sharp Company would fight Ren Xiaosu for the grenades. They just handed all the grenades they found over to Ren Xiaosu. At this moment, the battle at Mt Wuchuan had benefited Ren Xiaosu's cause as the number of troops in garrison 146 had decreased by several times after their soldiers were deployed to the front lines. There were usually 2 supernatural beings stationed at the garrison base as well. However, only one remained at this moment, and that supernatural being was none other than Zhong Cheng himself. It was just that no one knew where he was right now. So Ren Xiaosu did not encounter any particularly effective resistance as he made his way upstairs in a killing spree. After all, he could casually drop grenades anywhere in the building as he wished while the enemy had to be cautious. There was a large amount of information stored here, and many of those who were in the building were the Zone Consortium's own people. As such, they still harbored fantasies that as long as one of them could gun down Ren Xiaosu, he would definitely be done for. But none of them managed to hit Ren Xiaosu, and most of them died before they could even see him. Besides, half of those in the administrative building were clerical staff officers, while the remaining half consisted of officers equipped with pistols and some normal garrison troops. As soldiers guarding a place like this, the garrison troops were not equipped with grenades at all. Blood was flowing down the stairway and trickling onto the next level with audible dripping sounds. After Ren Xiaosu rushed up to the third story, a person stealthily climbed out of a closet in an office on the second story. He did not even have the courage to put up a fight just now. At this moment, he realized he might still have a chance to escape. The explosions had already moved on to the upper floors. The chubby officer finally managed to get out of the closet after some struggling. But when he walked to the corridor, he suddenly slipped and fell heavily onto the ground. Due to the sticky blood that was flowing on the ground, the floor was very difficult to walk on. If one could not find their balance, they would surely slip and fall. When the chubby officer landed on the ground, he let out a cry in pain. But he regretted it immediately as he wondered if that would have attracted the enemy's attention. But the enemy was already upstairs, surely he wouldn't turn back to kill him, right? But before he could stop worrying, he suddenly saw someone throw a grenade out of a shadow next to him. Clang! Ren Xiaosu cut open the door. Before proceeding up to the fourth story, he hid stealthily behind a window and took a look outside. He saw more than 100 soldiers already gathered below the tower. With a glare, Ren Xiaosu began to search through the entirety of the fourth story. It would still take a while for the brigade outside the base to get back. If there were 500 Zone Consortium soldiers in the base, there would only be about 300 soldiers below the tower after taking into account the 100 or so troops he had just killed. To be honest, Ren Xiaosu was hoping he could attract an even greater number of Zone Consortium troops back to the base. This was so he would get a better opportunity to kill the Zone Consortium's higher UPS once he rushed out of here. As such, Ren Xiaosu believed that his plan of breaking into the Zone Consortium's base had achieved its goal of disrupting their plans. When he slashed open another locked door, Ren Xiaosu was startled. He instinctively thought of ducking into the corner to hide as he saw 30 soldiers standing inside this spacious room. But Ren Xiaosu realized what was going on. After he broke into the room, the soldiers did not even move. They just stood like statues. Ren Xiaosu cautiously looked at them and was shocked to discover he actually knew these soldiers. Weren't these the Yang Consortium's nano-soldiers? When Yang Xiaojin was assigned to exterminate the bandits, her third uncle had sent a platoon of nano-soldiers to ensure her safety. But Ren Xiaosu never saw those nano-soldiers again after Yang Xiaojin suddenly took him on another route to the valley. But shouldn't these nano-soldiers have continued marching north with Zhong Cheng? Even if they had failed to exterminate the bandits or encountered something unexpected, it didn't make sense that they would be standing here like statues. Suddenly, Ren Xiaosu remembered what Zhang Jinglin had told him. We have evidence to suspect that Zhong Cheng's superpower allows him to gain control of others. A conjecture popped up in Ren Xiaosu's mind. Could these nano-soldiers have fallen under the control of Zhong Cheng to become his trump cards? At this moment, the voice from the palace in his mind said, "Nano-machines not paired to a consciousness have been detected. Would you like to establish a connection?" Ren Xiaosu was stunned for a moment. In the past, he could only reset the nano-machines of nano-soldiers who had died, so why was it different this time? Wait a minute. Ren Xiaosu remembered what the palace had said. He realized the condition required for the palace to reset the nano-machines was not dependent on whether a person was dead but whether there was any consciousness controlling them. And these nano-soldiers had been put into some kind of a sleep mode after being controlled by Zhong Cheng. Therefore, were their consciousnesses forcefully suspended by Zhong Cheng as well? Living like this could not be more miserable since they did not have control over their own lives. Reset them. Ren Xiaosu answered. Since his last battle in the wilderness, Ren Xiaosu often missed the feeling of having those nano-machines. That was because the armor was like a lifeline that could allow him to ignore the effects of standard firearms for a short duration. Although he missed having them, he had not had the opportunity to search for more new nano-machines. He had almost given up hope, so he was surprised he could actually reunite with the nano-machines here in the Zone Consortium today. As the saying goes, you search high and low only to find it when you least expect it. Removing remote access protocol. Resetting to factory settings. Restarting system. Pairing successful. As a silvery stream gathered towards Ren Xiaosu, he could feel that familiar power returning to his body. He heard shuffling footsteps from downstairs again. It sounded like the troops gathered outside had run out of patience and were going to launch an assault. But Ren Xiaosu chose to ignore them this time and focused on receiving all the nano-machines. What were several hundred Zone Consortium soldiers in the face of the armor? Ren Xiaosu felt a sense of security spreading in him. Once he regained this power, the Zone Consortium's higher UPS living in Stronghold 146 had better start praying hard for themselves. This was Ren Xiaosu at his peak. And Stronghold 146 was destined to be his final battlefield in the northwest. No. Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt it was unnecessary for the Zone Consortium higher UPS to even pray anymore. They might as well just prepare for their deaths. But before all of the nano-machines were fully integrated into his body, the nano-soldiers in the room suddenly charged at him. It seemed like they had received a command from someone. Ren Xiaosu frowned. Zhong Cheng must have reached somewhere close enough for him to control the nano-soldiers. Zhong Cheng. When this name flashed through Ren Xiaosu's mind, all he felt was a killing intent. Although all of the nano-soldiers charged at him, these nano-soldiers without nano-machines were fragile as a paper to Ren Xiaosu. At the same time as the nano-soldiers were activated, a man darted in from outside to coordinate with them to kill Ren Xiaosu. This person that had just arrived was Zhong Cheng. Ren Xiaosu sneered as he drew out his saber to slash at him. But the moment Zhong Cheng came into the room, he suddenly realized something was not right. He backed off immediately and just managed to dodge Ren Xiaosu's black saber that was coming at him. Zhong Cheng stared blankly at the nano-soldiers who were heavily injured and shouted at Ren Xiaosu, "Where'd all the nano-machines go? Why have the nano-machines and these nano-soldiers disappeared?" Ren Xiaosu guided the remaining stream of nano-machines into his blood vessels while explaining patiently, "Isn't it normal that there's no nano-machines and nano-soldiers? You don't get a wife and a wife cake." Ren Xiaosu was now certain that even though Zhong Cheng could control others, he could not control them in the way he could control his shadow clone, whose sensory perception would give feedback to his own senses. Otherwise, Zhong Cheng would not have rushed into the room at all. Zhong Cheng was not in the mood to crack lame jokes with Ren Xiaosu at a time like this. When he realized that one of his trump cards had been nullified, he leaped out of a window in the hallway behind him without hesitation. He had decisively jumped from the 4th story in an attempt to join up with the garrison troops below to escape. He knew full well he was no match for Ren Xiaosu. Jumping from the 4th story was better than dying on the spot. But this time, Ren Xiaosu would definitely not allow him to continue living. If he missed this chance to get him, Zhong Cheng would probably conceal himself and escape from here. At that time, it would be difficult to find him again in the sea of people. So for Ren Xiaosu, this was his only chance to get him. Ren Xiaosu instantly covered his entire body with the armor and stood by the window. He saw Zhong Cheng limping towards the Zone Consortium's defensive line while shouting at them, "Kill that man at the window! Fire at him!" But as the hail of bullets hit the armor, they could only see sparks flying. Under the gazes of the Zone Consortium soldiers, a huge and massive armored being suddenly leaped and crashed down in front of them without any fancy moves. With this leap, Ren Xiaosu took out the Zone Consortium's defensive line in the most dominating fashion. 1A sweetheart cake or wife cake or marriage pie is a traditional Cantonese pastry with a thin crust of flaky pastry, and made with a filling of winter melon, almond paste, and sesame, and spiced with 5-spice powder. Wife cake is the translation of Lu Po Beng from Cantonese, and although the meaning is wife, the literal translation is old lady cake, paralleling the colloquial usage of old lady for wife in American English. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/sweetheart_cake. No matter what powers a supernatural being had, they would inevitably possess a physique far superior to a normal person's, and that was why Zhong Cheng dared to jump down from the 4th story. If it were a normal person, they would have fractured all of the bones in their body. However, Zhong Cheng only sprained his foot. Zhong Cheng was normally the person in charge of the brigade garrisoned at Stronghold 146 due to his status as a family member of the Zone Consortium's main branch. As he was also a supernatural being, all the soldiers and officers of the brigade followed his lead. In the eyes of the Zone Consortium's soldiers, Zhong Cheng was a powerful and mysterious person. When Zhong Cheng received the news and rushed back to the base, many of the soldiers felt the situation would get under control as he was back. No matter how powerful the enemy in the administrative building was, would they not be able to handle him with a supernatural being and several hundred elite soldiers on their side? But the reality was that Zhong Cheng had jumped out of the window in an extremely pathetic manner after they had just formed the defensive line at ground level. His previously glossy hair was also in a disheveled state while his expression betrayed a look of fear. As a core figure of the Zone Consortium, he usually portrayed himself as a very powerful man. However, he was not actually as powerful as everyone thought. Zhong Cheng's jump dealt a severe blow to the morale of the entire garrison. This was even more damaging than any physical injuries they could receive. They suddenly felt that the enemy they were facing was invincible. If even a supernatural being like Zhong Cheng was trying to escape, what could these normal soldiers do against the enemy? But Zhong Cheng did not care about that. Since his trump card was now lost, he only thought about fleeing. This was when a huge object leaped out of the window from the 4th story and landed on the defensive line below. No one expected the enemy would be so strong that he could just tear apart their defensive formation so easily. With such an imperious gesture, the enemy's intentions were fully laid out even if he did not say a word. I dare to stand before you for I fear none of you. Although the soldiers at the defensive line were badly shaken, they still knew what they had to do. They immediately consolidated their firepower and started shooting at the armored being. After some modifications by Wang Yuqi, An Yuqian, and the rest of the students, the armor looked even more menacing now and exuded an aura of violence. The armor no longer had a flat and smooth surface. Instead, it was made up of a dense honeycomb structure that was carefully engineered by An Yuqian. To others, the surface of the armor looked just like a dull matte finish. But upon closer inspection, they would discover it was made up of countless honeycombs. A physical structure like this not only required fewer materials to build but was also far more useful for shock absorption than a smooth and flat surface. As countless bullets rained down at the armor, Ren Xiaosu's gaze remained dead set on the escaping Zhong Cheng. Zhong Cheng was limping towards the outside of the base, and it could be seen that he did not care about the survival of the soldiers behind him. As he was a supernatural being, he could run faster than normal people even with a sprained ankle. At this moment, Zhong Cheng was enduring the pain in his ankle as he fled desperately to join up with the Zone Consortium's main forces in Stronghold 146. He had injured the soft tissue in his ankle during the jump and torn his cartilage. If he continued running like this, he might not be able to fully recover. But even if he had to lose his leg from overexertion, it was still better than losing his life. Not only that, Zhong Cheng even commanded the other soldiers to intercept the enemy as he made a run for it. Ren Xiaosu glanced at the Zone Consortium soldiers in front of him and suddenly charged towards Zhong Cheng. The Zone Consortium soldiers who tried to block Ren Xiaosu were weak as toys. In just a few seconds, Ren Xiaosu broke through the defensive line. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu was throwing grenades at the enemy as he fought them, as though it cost him nothing at all. Even at this moment, Ren Xiaosu had still not forgotten he was here to wipe out the troops of Stronghold 146. If he could kill the Zone Consortium's higher UPS as well, that would be even better. Now that he was in his peak condition, he would kill as many Zone Consortium soldiers as he could. Only by doing so would the Zone Consortium be afraid of him. When he would try to kill the Zone Consortium's higher UPS later on, he would face less resistance from the troops. At this moment, the Zone Consortium's base was no longer able to organize any new forces to stop him. The remaining soldiers who luckily survived could only watch in fear as Ren Xiaosu continued his pursuit of Zong Cheng. They suddenly realized that this supernatural being that had appeared out of nowhere must have had some sort of a feud with their brigade commander. And the brigade commander they usually feared so greatly was not as strong as they had imagined. Of course, they could never have expected that Han Yang, the person their brigade commander relied on the most, had already been sniped by Yang Xiaojun in the wilderness. Furthermore, those 30 nano-soldiers were like a gift Zong Cheng had been putting aside for Ren Xiaosu and waiting for him to claim. If Zong Cheng had controlled other supernatural beings, that would have really given Ren Xiaosu a headache. But to him, those nano-soldiers were no threat at all but a pleasant surprise. When Zong Cheng reached the gate of the base, he was overjoyed. He saw that some of the troops from the search party had returned at this moment as reinforcements. He shouted at them, "The enemy is right behind me. Kill him!" Approximately 500 of the Zone Consortium's troops had returned. As this was a battalion, Zong Cheng was finally able to feel more at ease. As he had controlled the nano-soldiers, he knew full well that the usage of the nano-machines was limited by a power source. If a nano-soldier were to fully unleash the power of the nano-machines, they would only last around 10 minutes. With the number of troops here, he could easily pile them on him and finish him off. And the enemy was all by himself. The last time the Zone Consortium attacked Ren Xiaosu in the wilderness, he had only managed to get away because he had Wang Kenjiang's steam locomotive supporting him. And besides, that supernatural being who could trigger a giant earthquake was not in Stronghold 146 either. At the thought of Wang Kenjiang's name, Zong Cheng still grew angry. Although Wang Kongyang claimed he had a grudge against Ren Xiaosu, he still helped him secretly. And because of Wang Kenjiang's seizure of Zong Wu's assets, the higher UPS had indirectly pushed the blame on him as well. Someone privately reminded him that the elders felt he should have killed off Wang Kongyang when he made his move on him back then. How could he have allowed such a powerful supernatural being to get away? But there was no time to think about that anymore. He would just have to kill Ren Xiaosu first. But when Zong Cheng turned around, he suddenly saw a steam locomotive breaking through the Zone Consortium's formation and charging at him. The Zone Consortium troops who had just returned did not even have time to react as more than half of them got crushed like they were toy blocks. Zong Cheng was a little bewildered. Why had the steam locomotive suddenly appeared here when he did not see Wang Kongyang around? And for example, Wang Kenjiang's steam locomotive was known to only have 4 carriages, but why did the Zone Consortium's troops keep seeing one that had 16? Therefore, Ren Xiaosu's superpower was that he could copy the superpowers of other supernatural beings. This made Zong Cheng even more fearful. If supernatural beings were the gods of the world, what kind of existence would a supernatural being that could outrageously copy the powers of other supernatural beings, and even further enhance them, be? When Zong Cheng attacked Ren Xiaosu's group, he did not give a fuck about this young man. His target had all along been Yang Xiaojun and the organization backing her, the saboteurs. Now, Zong Cheng realized that he had made a huge mistake. Suddenly, Zong Cheng stopped a military off-road vehicle that was speeding back to the base. He dragged the Zone Consortium soldier out of the driver's seat and threw him onto the ground. Then he drove the vehicle away. As the night curfew had already been imposed on Stronghold 146, there were no pedestrians out on the streets. Only the Zone Consortium soldiers could be seen patrolling. But no matter how many soldiers came back as reinforcements, Zhong Cheng was not going to turn around anymore. He just shouted into the vehicle's walkie-talkie and commanded all of the Zone Consortium soldiers in Stronghold 146 to come back to hold off Ren Xiaosu. Zhong Cheng thought to himself, there should be an extent to how much supernatural beings can use their superpowers, right? For example, he could only control 30 to 50 people with his power. In that case, there also had to be a limit for the steam locomotive. Didn't it get blown into thin air after being bombed by the landmines in the wilderness? As long as he had enough soldiers, he could crush Ren Xiaosu. Zhong Cheng regained his composure slightly. One by one, the Zone Consortium's troops started returning to the base, with the largest consisting of a full company, while the smaller groups were made up of individual platoons. These sporadic forces would not be enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. Zhong Cheng looked at his surroundings and immediately ordered through the radio, "I'm leading the target towards Zijing Road now. All soldiers in the vicinity of Zijing Road, organize a defensive formation immediately and mount HMGs. Make sure to stop the steam locomotive that's chasing me." This would be the most effective method. Zhong Cheng knew he could not run away aimlessly and should instead lead Ren Xiaosu to where the Zone Consortium soldiers were the most concentrated so they could take him out while he was exhausted. It was destined to be a sleepless night in Stronghold 146 tonight. The alarm that blared through the night, along with the explosions and gunfire, would make it difficult for any residents in the stronghold to fall asleep. As some people watched quietly from a residential building on the street, they got a strange feeling. During the day, it was the Zone Consortium that was chasing after the young man. But now that it was nighttime, why had it suddenly become the young man chasing after the Zone Consortium soldiers while driving a train? Why had the roles suddenly reversed? Clarion and pleasant clangs of metal rang out as the steam locomotive traveled. This was the first time the residents in the stronghold witnessed a superpower with their own eyes. A child leaning against the windowsill shouted to their parents, "Daddy, it's a toy train." There were railroad tracks and trains that operated between Stronghold 146 and Stronghold 145, and many of the residents had taken them before. But in recent years, the Zone Consortium had been preparing for the war so intensively that the trains had become an exclusive means of transport for the military. When the adults heard their child's words, the father said with a complicated expression, "My child, that is a real train." Zheng Yuandong, the Qing Consortium's spy, was standing at a window somewhere in the stronghold. He had just witnessed with his very own eyes an off-road vehicle of the Zone Consortium fleeing with a train chasing behind it. Zheng Yuandong had heard of car chases before, but this was the first time he saw something like that, and this one even involved a train. Zheng Yuandong was probably one of the few who really knew what was happening here. He was the one who had personally led Ren Xiaosu into the base, while the steam locomotive had come charging out of there. Without even needing to analyze, he guessed what was going on. It was just that he could not understand why this young man was being so vicious. After Zheng Yuandong led Ren Xiaosu to the garrison base, he went back and reported to Luolan that it was probably the end for that kid. After all, he would definitely be done for by barging into such a tightly defended base by himself. At that time, Luolan remained silent for a while before saying, "I understand." He made his own choice. Even an idiot could sense the sadness in Luolan's tone when he said that. But what was he supposed to tell Boss Luo now? He could say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." It wasn't the end for that young man. "It's the Zone Consortium that was done for." Zheng Yuandong quietly climbed to the roof of a building. He was moving freely on top of the buildings and could leap 5 to 6 meters across buildings with a single step even though the gap felt like a gulf. Although he was not a supernatural being, he was one of the toughest spies in the Qing Consortium secret troops. Zheng Yuandong chased after the train for the entire time and saw for himself how the steam locomotive was smashing through every obstacle. The young man in the train calmly pursued the off-road vehicle in front of him and even threw several grenades from time to time. Ren Xiaosu had already put away his armor and stored the nanomachines back into his body to recharge it for the next battle. When he turned his head, he saw Zhang Yuandong leaping and scurrying across the roofs. He smiled and waved at Zhang Yuandong. He also signaled for him to stay away in case he accidentally got hurt. Just what kind of mental fortitude did he need to have to remain smiling in the face of all the danger around him? He wanted to tell Luolan every detail about today's events so the Qing Consortium could reassess the capability of this young man from an objective point of view. Ren Xiaosu had pursued Zhong Cheng until they were in the vicinity of Zijing Road. The traffic lights were still flashing at the huge intersection, while the neon lights on the surrounding buildings were still lit up. Hundreds of Zone Consortium soldiers stood guard at this intersection armed with a massive amount of weapons as they waited for the strange steam locomotive to enter their kill zone. Even Zhong Cheng could not help but step on the brakes when he saw the formation up ahead and wondered if they would be enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. But before the steam locomotive could arrive, something strange suddenly landed at the Zone Consortium's position via the shadow door. A soldier looked over and caught sight of it. He was surprised to see 4 playing cards lying on the ground. He saw 4 sixes, with the spade, heart, club, and diamond suits shining extraordinarily bright. At first, some of the soldiers did not even realize what was going on. They thought it was their fellow comrades who had accidentally dropped the cards and were wondering who had brought them here. If their commanding officer found out, they would probably be severely punished. But before they could figure it out, they saw the 4 sixes grow brighter and brighter. With a loud boom, the explosive poker instantly blasted close to 100 people into the sky. Ren Xiaosu had been keeping these 4 sixes as his trump card for a long time. He had always decried how difficult it was to get the higher value cards from explosive poker. He had been looking forward to witnessing the might of the jokers. However, gathering 4 sixes proved to be the limit after he tried collecting the cards for a long time. In that instant, a huge shockwave surged outwards like a tidal wave. Some of the residents in the surrounding were secretly watching from their homes. But when that shockwave swept through, the people hiding behind their windows were pushed backwards. The glass windows of the off-road vehicle Zhong Cheng was in were instantly shattered while the body shook non-stop. He heard a ringing in his ears and suddenly lost his sense of hearing. Looking at the Zone Consortium's defensive position burning up in flames in front of him, Ren Xiaosu rammed straight through it, sneering as he stood in the cab unit. The explosive poker's 4 sixes were powerful enough to destroy this formation of a few hundred people. Ren Xiaosu estimated that a little less than half of the soldiers at this position were fortunate enough to not die. But what could they do even if they survived? These Zone Consortium soldiers had already lost their fighting spirit after the blast. They did not even have the ability to think straight anymore. Zhong Cheng's ears were still ringing as he stepped on the gas and continued to escape. Fortunately, he was pretty far away from the defensive line when the blast occurred, or he would have died in the explosion. Ren Xiaosu had tried to use the shadow door to kill Zhong Cheng by dropping some grenades on him. However, as the two of them were moving at high speeds, and with the shadow door having some margin of error as well, Ren Xiaosu did not manage to succeed even after several attempts. But Ren Xiaosu gave up trying when he noticed the situation at Zijing Road and wondered where Zhong Cheng would lead him in the course of his escape. It was not that he was intentionally teasing Zhong Cheng. But if he were to only kill him, that would probably have too small an impact on the overall situation of the war. Ren Xiaosu's reason for coming to Stronghold 146 was to resolve the problem Fortress 178 was facing. He was unaware that the Zone Consortium troops in the Gobi had already been intercepted by Su Xianchu, nor did he know about the might of Zhang Jinglan's contingency plan. So now that Ren Xiaosu was in enemy territory, he decided he had to seriously consider the big picture as well after he had calmed down. Where could Zhong Cheng escape to in his panic? Where would the Zone Consortium's fighting forces in Stronghold 146 be concentrated? At the site of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS, of course. Zhang Yuandong had told Ren Xiaosu before that half of the brigade at Stronghold 146 was trying to capture him while the other half was in charge of guarding the Zone Consortium's board members. At this moment, the soldiers searching for Ren Xiaosu were still scattered across the stronghold, so Zhong Cheng could not organize them effectively within a short time. Therefore, in Zhong Cheng's eyes, it would only be possible for him to be saved by the troops who were currently guarding the Zone Consortium's higher UPS. Actually, Zhong Cheng had just realized this as he was fleeing from Ren Xiaosu. Looking into the rear-view mirror, he found that the steam locomotive behind him was constantly keeping its distance. In a way, it felt like Ren Xiaosu was walking a dog. He had planned on leading Ren Xiaosu to a place with the largest number of troops so they could wear him down. But now, it felt more like he was leading Ren Xiaosu to attack the Zone Consortium troops in the stronghold. Zhong Cheng's face was covered in blood. His scalp had been cut by shrapnel that got blasted out of the massive explosion. With the blood flowing down his face, Zhong Cheng appeared even more savage. He was not stupid, so he immediately understood the scattered defensive forces had given Ren Xiaosu a sweet taste of things to come. Now, his opponent was deliberately letting him lead the way so he could find the other troops in the stronghold, which was where the Zone Consortium's higher UPS were. Zhong Cheng was stuck between a rock and a hard place. While he watched the steam locomotive in the rear-view mirror, he considered whether he should continue heading to where the Zone Consortium's higher UPS were. If he led Ren Xiaosu there and dragged in the board members, he would probably bear the consequences after the war. But Zhong Cheng got the thought, but where else can I go now? Although the board members' residences were at 3 separate locations, and even though some of them were elders from the same family branch as him, what choice did he have? He could only head to where the elders of the board were. After all, their troops were more elite and orderly. Zhong Cheng was struck by another thought. Since there were more than 2,000 soldiers in the defensive forces guarding the elders, that should be more than enough to stretch Ren Xiaosu's mental strength to the limit, right? In fact, Zhong Cheng was not wrong to think this way. From any normal person's point of view, there should be limits to a supernatural being's power no matter how ferocious they were. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu had just been chased around by the search party in the stronghold. If he was really as powerful as a god, why would he have needed to hide from his pursuers? In reality, the Zone Consortium had committed a strategic mistake tonight. They did not expect that Ren Xiaosu would actually head to the Zone Consortium's base. Due to the search party being scattered across the stronghold, Ren Xiaosu had gained the upper hand there. Furthermore, the Zone Consortium made another mistake, which was Zhong Cheng misjudging Ren Xiaosu's mental strength. He thought he could completely wear down Ren Xiaosu by having an overwhelming number of people on his side. But actually, not even Ren Xiaosu knew the limits of his mental strength. Zhong Cheng calmed down a little. Since he had judged that Ren Xiaosu would soon get stretched to his limits, he could probably make an issue out of this matter to boost himself. Although the crisis was imminent, politicking could still turn bad happenings into good outcomes. He only needed to lead Ren Xiaosu to the territory of the other 2 Zone Consortium factions. On the one hand, he could wear down Ren Xiaosu with the number of troops standing guard there, and on the other hand, he could dispose of his dissidents with Ren Xiaosu's help. As a matter of fact, it was not always smooth sailing for him and Zhongxiang in the Zone Consortium. That was because the Zone Consortium's 3rd and 4th houses had joined forces to fight against their main branch, which was the most authoritative in the organization. As there were still more than 1,000 soldiers combined under those 2 family branches, they should be more than enough to wear Ren Xiaosu down in 2 separate battles. After that, his main branch would swoop in and clear up the mess before he opened up peace talks with Fortress 178. In that way, not only would the influence of his main branch not decrease, it might even grow stronger. Then, after a few years of rebuilding, he could make a comeback. When he thought of this, Zhong Cheng yanked on the steering wheel and drove in another direction. The pursuit had been going on for almost an hour. Zhong Cheng was speeding to the 3rd house's territory with Ren Xiaosu chasing him. The troops outside of the 3rd Ancillary Branch's manor had already set up check hedgehogs to stop any vehicles from entering. They also had guards standing by with heavy weapons in waiting. When Zhong Cheng was about to arrive at the manor, he shouted on the radio, "Move the hedgehogs away and let me through." The soldiers were somewhat hesitant, but Zhong Cheng yelled again, "I'm Zhong Cheng, commander of the 107th Combat Brigade. I'm ordering all of you to move the hedgehogs away right now and prepare to face the enemy." Although the troops guarding outside the 3rd Ancillary Branch's manor were also under the 107th Combat Brigade, they were mainly responsible for protecting the manor. As the battalion commander was the eldest son of the 3rd Ancillary Branch, he didn't really heed Zhong Cheng's orders. An officer just stared at Zhong Cheng from the forward position as the off-road vehicle approached. However, it did not look like he would be stepping aside. He did not have any intention of letting Zhong Cheng through. Fourth brother was the eldest son of the 3rd Ancillary Branch, as well as the commander of the 1229th Battalion, which was under the 107th Combat Brigade. Fourth brother lividly pondered this for a few seconds before saying, "Move the hedgehogs aside and let Zhong Cheng through." Seeing that the hedgehogs had been shifted away, Zhong Cheng was overjoyed. Then he floored it and drove forward. However, he did not stop after entering the defensive position and continued driving deeper into the manor. He was going to escape from the western entrance of the manor. When fourth brother saw Zhong Cheng continuing to flee, he felt that something was wrong. If the troops here were really enough to handle the supernatural being as Zhong Cheng had claimed, why would he still need to run away? The Zone Consortium's fourth brother growled, "Zhong Cheng, you treacherous bastard, you're despicable." "Sir, what should we do now?" the deputy commander of the 1229th Battalion asked. "Defend the position." As if a supernatural being can take on an entire stronghold all by themselves, the Zone Consortium's fourth brother said. As the steam locomotive approached the manor, Ren Xiaosu resorted to his usual tactic again and started dropping grenades on the defensive line to break it up. In between, he also threw out 4 5s from the explosive poker deck he had. However, the power of 4 5s was much weaker than that of 4 6s. Then 3 soldiers on the Zone Consortium's defensive position carrying RPG launchers fired at Ren Xiaosu. As the steam locomotive was a really large target, how could the RPGs miss? But as they waited for the RPGs to explode, they saw the huge steam locomotive transforming into black mist. A second later, an armored being sprang out of the mist. While still in midair, he contorted his body and dexterously dodged the incoming RPGs by passing through the gaps between them. When the armor-clad Ren Xiaosu landed on the ground, he started charging forward, making the entire ground quake as he did so. The Zone Consortium soldiers felt a sense of powerlessness. Seeing that their bullets were totally ineffective against their enemy and with their RPGs missing him entirely, they didn't know how to deal with him. However, Ren Xiaosu did not engage the enemies here any further. He was only looking to destroy the manor quickly with his grenades and kill as many of the enemy's troops as possible. The third house was doomed. Of course, Ren Xiaosu could not guarantee that all the places he had just attacked would end up getting destroyed, nor could he finish off the soldiers and members of the Zone Consortium who had survived the blasts. Whether or not they were killed was all down to luck. After the 3rd Ancillary Branch's manor was attacked, an old man crawled out from under the ruins. When the Zone Consortium's battalion commander saw that his father was all right, he immediately ran forward to help him up. "Father, let's retreat. We can't stay here any longer." The old man looked especially comical when the comb-over used to cover his bald head were scattered. He snapped, "Retreat? Haven't you realized by now? This is the main branch's scheme. Zhong Cheng has more than 1,000 soldiers under his command, yet he couldn't even stop a supernatural being? No matter how strong a supernatural being is, they don't have an endless amount of mental strength. So why was that supernatural being still up and running? It's obvious that Zhong Cheng is taking this chance to eliminate his dissidents. The expression on this battalion commander's face turned extremely sullen. Earlier, when Zhong Cheng entered the defensive position and continued fleeing, he had already thought that something was amiss. The elder's expression turned dark. That little shit, Zhong Cheng, has turned against our zone consortium, so don't blame me for not caring about our family ties. Call the fourth branch immediately. We must unite against the main branch. After so many years of infighting within the zone consortium, Zhong Cheng's first thoughts after encountering Ren Xiaosu's attack on Stronghold 146 was to lead him to wipe out the third and fourth ancillary branches. At the same time, he also wanted to use the third and fourth house's strength to wear down Ren Xiaosu. Meanwhile, after the third house was implicated, they did not choose to flee, nor mention anything about organizing a search party to hunt down Ren Xiaosu. Instead, they immediately wanted to join up with the other faction to get their revenge. But when their call to the fourth ancillary branch connected, the person answering immediately said, "That little shit, Zhong Cheng, brought a supernatural being to our manor. Hurry over here. We need reinforcements." The third house fell silent. It seemed that the fourth house was done for as well. Stronghold 146 was in utter chaos now. However, Zhong Cheng could no longer clearly hear the nearby explosions due to the ringing in his ears. He looked in his rear-view mirror and was surprised to see the armored being still chasing after him. However, it seemed to have slowed down somewhat. Zhong Cheng sneered to himself. He felt that his plan had probably succeeded. Zhong Cheng did not even consider the possibility that Ren Xiaosu might be tricking him. Even if Ren Xiaosu were a god, he would still get tired after battling for so long. He took a phone out of his pocket and called his father. As soon as the call went through, Zhong Cheng quickly said, "Father, that Ren Xiaosu should be at his limits. I'll lead him to our manor right away, so get ready for battle. After we kill him, we can consolidate the resources left behind by the third and fourth houses." On the other end, his father shouted, "Don't you fucking bring him here." But Zhong Cheng could barely hear anything due to his tinnitus. He said, "Okay, I'll bring him over right away." Then Zhong Cheng ended the call and focused back on driving. He even looked at the fuel gauge. Although the gas tank was close to empty, there was enough for him to drive back to the entrance of his manor. But as he was making his escape, Zhong Cheng suddenly felt an inkling of danger. He saw the shadow door appear next to him in the vehicle, then felt a saber gently slash him before disappearing. Zhong Cheng was shocked. When the black saber disappeared, he immediately began to inspect his wound. However, he realized that it was just a superficial injury. Learning this, Zhong Cheng felt slightly relieved. It looked like his enemy had missed. But before he could dwell any further on it, the shadow door appeared again. He felt another slash that left a wound on him that was neither shallow nor deep. Would Zhong Cheng still not understand what was going on at this moment? His enemy was obviously trying to torture him. Ren Xiaosu clearly had the chance to kill him, yet he did not seem to be in a hurry to do so. Zhong Cheng felt humiliated. This was his first time facing this type of situation. There was nothing he could do but step harder on the gas pedal and continue to escape. At this moment, Zheng Yuandong was standing on the roof of a tall building that overlooked the stronghold. He was stunned by what he saw. Previously, he thought he had overestimated Ren Xiaosu's abilities. But right now, this Qing consortium spy was finding it a little hard to believe. A lone supernatural being was absolutely dominating the entire zone consortium's stronghold 146. Zheng Yuandong knew that a lot of what was happening here was mainly opportunistic. For example, Ren Xiaosu had disrupted the entire zone consortium plan by attacking their military base. While the troops that were scattered around the stronghold wanted to return as reinforcements, they were not as mobile as Ren Xiaosu. Therefore, they could only rush back in small waves like servers sending dishes to a table in a 10-course dinner. Of course, Ren Xiaosu would not have achieved this either if he were not ruthless enough. Zheng Yuandong had seen for himself how Ren Xiaosu had used an unknown method to somehow blow up the Zone Consortium's defensive positions. Furthermore, he could even protect himself with steel armor, drive a steam locomotive, and not feel threatened by firearms and explosives. Zheng Yuandong had taken a shortcut to the manor of the Zone Consortium's main house. When he saw how the third and fourth houses were destroyed, he knew that Ren Xiaosu's next target would most likely be the main house. But Zheng Yuandong was worried about how Ren Xiaosu had wasted some time to destroy the manors of the third and fourth ancillary branches. As such, the Zone Consortium's main branch had already reorganized some of the stray troops and gathered them outside of their manor. Fortunately, a small group of reinforcements appeared and managed to delay Ren Xiaosu a little. This allowed Zhong Cheng to get away from the endless torture of being cut by the saber. The stronghold residents no longer dared to watch the commotion. All of them hid in their bathrooms at home, afraid that a sudden attack would deal them collateral damage. The Zone Consortium troops scattered across the stronghold streamed towards the main branch's manor, with someone giving them orders to assemble through the radio. The Zone Consortium's higher UPS in that manor were panicking. They could only hope that it was not too late. Zheng Yuandong finally made it here as well. He concealed himself on the roof of a tall building and watched the situation unfold. The sky in the distance was filled with smoke and fire, like it represented the Zone Consortium's future going up in flame. Although the Zone Consortium was beginning to collapse on the fronts, they could still rely on their vast territory to fight a strategic war if they compacted their defensive lines once more. As Fortress 178 had too few soldiers, if they continued to march into the heartland where Stronghold 146 was, the worry was that their battlefront would get overextended. But everything changed with the arrival of a young man at Stronghold 146. In fact, Zheng Yuandong had figured out what Ren Xiaosu was here for. Wasn't he just looking to kill the core figures of the Zone Consortium? Anyone could have guessed it. However, he did not believe that Ren Xiaosu could achieve that at the beginning. At this moment, Zhong Cheng looked behind him through the rear-view mirror and noticed the speed of the pursuing armored being was slowing down bit by bit. Zhong Cheng immediately knew why this was, as he had also used nanomachines before. They were starting to run out of juice. Estimating the time, he knew Ren Xiaosu could not handle such a drawn-out battle even if he had recharged the nanomachines during the pursuit. As the manor was just in front of him, Zhong Cheng floored it again. The soldiers outside the entrance automatically moved the hedgehogs aside for him. After Zhong Cheng passed through successfully, they returned to their defensive formation. Those cold and unfeeling firearms and heavy weapons were all aiming at the end of the long street. Although Zhong Cheng's father was extremely furious by what he had done tonight, the Zhong clan's patriarch could not bear to see his son die before his very eyes. Zhong Cheng's father was already 71 years old. Both Zhong Cheng and Zhong Xiang were born when he was at an advanced age, so they were extremely precious to him. The Zhong clan's patriarch used to have another son, but he died of lung cancer. This was considered a secret within the Zhong clan. 2 years after the eldest son of the main branch had passed away, his wife got pregnant again. Initially, the members of the Zone Consortium were furious and thought the eldest son's widow had dishonored the family name. However, the Zone clan's patriarch stood his ground and took the widow, who was also his daughter-in-law, as his concubine. In modern civilization, concubinage was a regressive practice. Further, she was his own daughter-in-law. Only then did the Zone Consortium's higher UPS finally understand what had happened. So it turned out the Zone clan's patriarch had committed an immoral act. Who else could the widow's child belong to? It was clear the Zone clan's patriarch was responsible. But the Zone Consortium's main branch was firmly in power, so everyone kept quiet as though nothing had happened. Even Zhong Cheng and Zhong Xiang were unaware of this. However, there were also rumors within the family that Zhong Cheng and Zhong Xiang might not be the biological sons of the Zone clan's patriarch. After all, the patriarch was so old. As for whether the patriarch had done any paternity tests, no one knew. Zhong Cheng had already driven into the manor. Initially, the patriarch wanted to punish him severely. But when he saw Zhong Cheng's body covered in blood and wounds, he could not bear to do so anymore. He slapped his face, but that just made Zhong Cheng's tinnitus even worse. The patriarch held his anger back and said, "Stand aside. We'll talk about what you did after tonight." Someone off to the side noticed that Zhong Cheng was still in a daze, so they hurriedly pulled him aside. The bulky armored being rounded a corner and appeared in front of everyone. In an instant, all the firepower outside the Zone Consortium's manor burst with the intention of annihilating the enemy at the end of the long street. But the armored being did not slow down at all. Instead, it sped up and moved even faster. Zheng Yuandong was standing on the roof of a tall building in the distance as he watched the scene unfold. Under the dark sky, the Zone Consortium's position was like an insurmountable mountain. A violent storm of firepower was created in the atmosphere, while the aggressive armored being approached it ruthlessly in an unpredictable fashion. The sound of the steel armor stomping on the ground reverberated like a heavy war drum that was as loud as thunder. "Is this kid really going to continue charging forward?" Zheng Yuandong mumbled. "The Zone Consortium has called so many troops back here, and Ren Xiaosu should also be at his limits now. He can't be that fearless, right?" But just as he finished, he discovered the armored being had picked up speed again. The cold and unfeeling steel armor had remained quiet throughout the battle. But amid the silence, it seemed to be roaring at the Zone Consortium with rage. The clouds of dust that had been kicked up by stray bullets hitting the ground trailed behind the steel armor like a solitary flag waving in the wind as it charged forward. "I'm convinced." Zheng Yuandong sighed. Before this era of the rise of supernatural beings, he was the most elite Qing Consortium spy around. His assassination methods were extremely direct and efficient, and he was a remarkably strong fighter. Even after this era began, Zheng Yuandong still felt that he could kill them even though they were supernatural beings. But tonight, Ren Xiaosu had single-handedly upended his thinking. All of a sudden, he understood that the era he belonged to was truly over. "No, I can't accept this." In his boundless solitude, Zheng Yuandong's gaze was fixated on the prominent armored being out in the distance. Suddenly, a resolute strength started growing in his heart. It felt like it was bursting with the force of erupting magma, the bombardment of artillery fire, and the destructive winds of a tornado. That ambition that had accumulated in him over the years burst forth. A second later, Zheng Yuandong looked at the armored being in astonishment. He had actually awakened his superpower. This was the power he had been desiring for a long time. Even after witnessing the birth of so many supernatural beings, Zheng Yuandong had yet to awaken his superpower. But just as he was about to give up on that happening, the sight of how that young man battled on had triggered the immeasurable unacceptance in him. This was what shocked Zheng Yuandong the most. He knew he would not have felt so agitated if he did not see that armored being charging forward with such an indomitable spirit. "Since my power has been awakened, does it mean I can help him now?" Zheng Yuandong wondered. But before he could come to a decision, he saw the armored being suddenly turn left and run away just as it was about to reach the Zone Consortium's position. Zheng Yuandong and the Zone Consortium's troops were all dumbfounded by the sight. The armored being ran away just like that? Whatever happened to that indomitable spirit? Zhong Cheng and the others were also confused by the events as they watched from the manor. The Zone clan's patriarch frowned. He looked at Zhong Cheng and asked, "What's going on? Why did he run away?" Zhong Cheng said, "Can you speak louder?" The patriarch felt his blood pressure shoot up again and got the urge to slap Zhong Cheng. But before he could do so, the orderlies around them shrieked in agony and pain. The Zone clan's patriarch immediately turned around. The young man who had come to kill them had arrived behind them without anyone realizing it. He was holding a black saber, looking invincible. But Zhong Cheng and the Zone Consortium's higher UPS were right in front of him, so how could he possibly give up now? If Ren Xiaosu gave up at this point, then he might as well have killed Zhong Cheng earlier. If he did not kill Zhongcheng tonight, he would not be able to take it lying down. As such, Ren Xiaosu put his armor onto the shadow clone during the pursuit while no one was paying attention. On one hand, he would not have to worry about himself falling into a dangerous situation even if the nanomachines died midway. On the other hand, the armor solved the problem of the shadow clone getting hit by any stray bullets between its eyes. As the shadow clone was launching its frontal assault on the defensive position while wearing the armor, Ren Xiaosu barged in from the side of the manor. The troops in the Zone Consortium's manor were all concentrated at the front. Throughout the night, Ren Xiaosu had used his actions to mislead Zhongcheng into thinking he would launch a frontal assault. But just as everyone had gotten used to his movements amid the chaos, Ren Xiaosu decided to execute the decapitation strike at the weakest point of the enemy. Before Ren Xiaosu, the defenses at the back of the manor were practically useless. Zhongcheng was shocked when he turned around and saw Ren Xiaosu attacking from behind. Then Ren Xiaosu grabbed one of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS as a human shield as he sped towards him. Zhongcheng shouted without any regard for the human shield, "Kill him! Ignore the human shield and open fire!" But the Zone Consortium soldiers hesitated for a moment. Importantly, the human shield Ren Xiaosu was holding was Zhongcheng's uncle. As Ren Xiaosu held Zhongcheng's uncle and advanced, he sneered at him, "Ask them to save you. Otherwise, I'll kill you right away." Zhongcheng's uncle got so anxious that he swore at Zhongcheng, "Zhongcheng, you little bastard! How dare you ignore my safety!" Suddenly, Zhongcheng raised his gun and shot his uncle dead before he could finish speaking. The soldiers around them and the Zone clan's patriarch were stunned. While they were momentarily stunned, Ren Xiaosu was already bearing down on Zhongcheng. But to everyone's surprise, Zhongcheng, who had long been highly regarded as a supernatural being by the Zone Consortium, did not even put up a fight. Instead, he pushed his father into Ren Xiaosu's saber. With a slash, the Zone clan's patriarch was beheaded. A moment later, Ren Xiaosu threw the human shield in his hands aside and charged Zhongcheng at full speed. As the black saber in his hands cut through the night, it gleamed with a menacing aura. In an era where firearms and explosives were clearly king, this saber was like the sword of judgment that was capable of slicing through anything. When the Zone Consortium soldiers saw that Ren Xiaosu had nothing to shield himself with after throwing aside the body, they immediately aimed their guns at him. But before they could even pull the trigger, the shadow clone had already come back. The shadow clone ran in a frenzy and crashed into the Zone Consortium troops. The sound of their bones breaking was so loud that it sounded like firecrackers being set off. When the shadow clone barged into the defensive line, it showcased an almost unparalleled level of individual combat power. "City Crusher!" Ren Xiaosu roared. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu took a small step forward and slashed the saber horizontally. The glow of burning flames in the distance seemed like they were projecting images on the clouds above. Ren Xiaosu could see Su Jinyuan enjoying his corn, Jin Lan wearing a silly smile on his face, Yan Liuyuan standing next to big sister Xiao as he angrily brought about that disastrous earthquake, as well as that ray of hope that had been destroyed. From that moment onwards, Ren Xiaosu would often recall those scenes over and over every night. He uncovered these wounds in his heart again and again just so he could remind himself not to forget the anger of that day. Even when others thought that it was normal for people to die in war, he wanted to ensure that everyone in the razor-sharp company survived and that no man was left behind. When not even Zhang Xiaoman himself believed he could survive, Ren Xiaosu still insisted on trying. So when Ren Xiaosu was finally confronting Zhongcheng at this moment, it was as though all of the underworld spirits of vengeance had followed him. As it turned out, when he was filled with all this hatred, he wasn't that different from Li Shenton at all. If he did not have that ray of light left in his heart, he would even want the entirety of Stronghold 146 to perish together with the Zone Consortium. Die! As the black saber slashed across Zhongcheng's waist, Ren Xiaosu watched as Zhongcheng gave him an incredulous expression. Then he turned around and left. Behind him, the shadow clone started slashing at the enemies without restraint in a bid to protect him. Moments before a hail of bullets could rain down on him, Ren Xiaosu made his retreat. He no longer had any lingering thoughts of fighting the enemy. It was not that he did not want to continue killing them, but that he must not do so anymore. The Zone Consortium was about to fall apart now that their leaders were dead. Shortly after, the troops from Fortress 178 would arrive to destroy the place, so he did not have to continue taking further risks. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu had been shot. No matter how unexpected it was that he would attack from the enemy's rear just now, there were still some Zone Consortium soldiers who managed to react. So Ren Xiaosu expected he would get shot. As of this moment, Ren Xiaosu had sustained 2 gunshot wounds to his abdomen. He had to shake off the Zone Consortium's pursuit as quickly as possible so he could extract the bullets and apply the black medicine on his wounds. But something else unexpected happened. The shadow clone that was now without the armor got shot again between its eyes. It poofed into a lump of black mist before dissipating away. Ren Xiaosu frowned. He could hear people shouting behind him. Some of them were shouting for medics, while others were alarming everyone else to the presence of an assassin. Ren Xiaosu's pursuers chased after him relentlessly. Although Ren Xiaosu had already leaped out of the manor and run 2 streets away, he still could not shake off the Zone Consortium's troops. Ren Xiaosu could even hear off-road vehicles roaring to life behind him. The Zone Consortium was enraged. Was he cornered now? Ren Xiaosu smiled. So what? Thinking of this, Ren Xiaosu suddenly turned around with his saber raised. He stared at his pursuers at the end of that long street, while the rumbling smoke and cloudy sky seemingly came to a standstill. Come at me. No one had expected that Ren Xiaosu would turn around, nor think that he would dare to take on a 1,000 people when he was already injured. But when his pursuers saw this, they subconsciously stepped on their brakes. They even had thoughts of turning around and fleeing. It felt gratifying when they were chasing after him, but in the course of the pursuit, they never really thought what would happen if they caught up to him. Did they make a suicidal decision to chase him? Although, the Zone Consortium soldiers knew that, with their numbers, they could simply pile up on the young man and crush him to death. But why would they do that? Who would see it now that the Zone clan's patriarch was dead? Furthermore, many of them would probably die in the process. But when their vehicles came to a stop, they saw Ren Xiaosu suddenly turn around and bolt. Fuck, we've been had. That kid is at his limits. After him. Of course, some of the troops had figured out what was at stake here, so they completely gave up on pursuing him. With this temporary cessation, the pursuers halved. But even though the number of pursuers halved, there were still a lot of them. Some of the troops wanted to kill Ren Xiaosu so they could get a reward. After all, someone would have to take over as the new patriarch of the Zone Consortium, so whoever came to power would definitely have to establish their authority by taking the head of their enemy. And the Zone Consortium would probably not be able to unite for as long as this young man remained alive. Although, they were never really united in the first place. Therefore, the Zone Consortium soldiers who were still pursuing Ren Xiaosu were mostly the ambitious ones. But as Ren Xiaosu fled madly while pressing on his wounds, someone suddenly shouted, "Ren Xiaosu, over here, quick!" Ren Xiaosu was startled. Who was calling out to him? He turned his head to the voice and saw Zhang Xiaoman waving at him cheerfully. Meanwhile, Jiao Xiaochen and the others were busy setting up mortars and heavy machine guns on the street corner. As for the deputy commander of the 1237th Regiment, he was lying helplessly off to the side with his hands and feet bound. After Ren Xiaosu dropped them off in the wilderness, the razor-sharp company had taken the risk of plundering a military factory to seize the military transport trucks and off-road vehicles in it, all so they could get to Stronghold 146 as quickly as possible. As everyone in the stronghold was attracted by the firepower surrounding Ren Xiaosu tonight, no one noticed the east gate had been breached by the razor-sharp company. They did not even encounter any proper resistance. Zhang Xiaoman was standing there in high spirits as he grinned, illuminated by the burning sky. "Get over here! We've come to save you!" Ren Xiaosu clutched his abdomen and walked over slowly. "What are y'all doing here?" Nearby, Fu Rao was loading ammunition into a heavy machine gun. "Didn't you say that in our razor-sharp company, no man gets left behind?" Zhang Xiaoman chuckled. Suddenly, he mimicked Zhang Jinglan's tone and said, "Ren Xiaosu, do you still remember what I said?" Ren Xiaosu was silent for a moment before saying with a smile, "You said that people always die in battle. The battlefield is a place where we have to put our trust in fate. Everything lies with fate. No one can control it." Zhang Xiaoman laughed again. "Do you still remember what your reply was?" Back then, Ren Xiaosu had said, "How would we know if we don't try? All of the razor-sharp company was in this together. One for all, and all for one." Since someone had declared that no man from the razor-sharp company would be left behind, they would have to keep their word no matter what. Zhang Xiaoman's cheeks looked especially stiff in the illumination of the fiery glow, but he suddenly turned cute. He spat on the ground and said with a smile, "Let's give them a fucking good beating." In that instant, 4 heavy machine guns started spitting out a barrage of fire at the end of the long street. The oncoming Zone Consortium troops were all caught off guard and fell to the ground like dominoes. Someone in the past had killed more than 3,000 people in a single afternoon using 2 heavy machine guns rigged at an intersection. Since the development of firearms, many people had forgotten that in the history of human warfare, heavy machine guns were ranked highest among all weapons for ability to kill. Zheng Yuandong was watching this quietly from afar. He had planned to rush to Ren Xiaosu's rescue, but he discovered that his comrades had already made it to Stronghold 146. Looking at the way the razor-sharp company was providing cover and support to each other, Zheng Yuandong suddenly wished he was not a spy anymore. He wanted to return to the Qing Consortium to look for his own comrades. But things were different after the razor-sharp company broke into the stronghold. While Ren Xiaosu was injured, this group of lunatics set up terrifying heavy machine guns in the streets of the stronghold and claimed the lives of the pursuing Zone Consortium soldiers, providing shelter and protection for Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu was leaning against a wall as he pressed down on his wounds. As there were shops and residential buildings on both sides of the street, some residents in the house behind him were shivering in fear at everything that was going on. But even in his battle to seek revenge tonight, Ren Xiaosu was still very careful to not cause the deaths of any innocent residents. This was all because Zhang Xiaoman had previously said that Fortress 178 had its own set of principles they abided by. "How did y'all manage to find me?" Ren Xiaosu wondered. The razor-sharp company was unfamiliar with the layout of Stronghold 146. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu had been fighting a highly mobile battle tonight, so it should have been difficult to locate him. Zhang Xiaoman smiled while reloading. "After we got into the stronghold, there was a fortune teller waiting for us at the gate. He even pointed out your position to us. At first, we didn't believe him. But after that, we actually heard gunshots coming from the position he pointed to." Ren Xiaosu was stunned. "Is the fortune teller you're talking about a thin, middle-aged man with a mustache who wears a pair of sunglasses and holds a banner that has the words Divine Foresight written on it?" Zhang Xiaoman was amused. "How did you know?" The Zone Consortium's troops had been thoroughly defeated by the razor-sharp company's heavy machine guns. In fact, that momentary burst of fire earlier had even beaten many of the Zone Consortium's soldiers into submission. The soldiers in the off-road vehicles could not even fight back in the face of the heavy machine guns peppering them. If it were under normal circumstances, these Zone Consortium troops would certainly not be so fragile. But now that more than half of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS had either been killed or wounded, the morale of the Zone Consortium's troops was affected. So when the soldiers of the razor-sharp company saw their enemies screaming in defeat, their morale was lifted. Jiao Xiaochen asked, "Xiaosu, you know that fortune teller too? I guess so. Ren Xiaosu was a little puzzled. Could that fortune teller be the real deal? But why would he guide the razor-sharp company to save him? Zhang Xiaoman said with a smile, he's one of our Fortress 178's people. I've only heard of him, and I didn't expect to bump into him here. Ren Xiaosu was completely dumbfounded. He's from Fortress 178. That's right. Zhang Xiaoman smiled and said, before we came here, the intelligence director, Wang Fengyuan, called and informed us that someone would receive us at Stronghold 146. He managed to match the code word with us, so that fortune teller is indeed an agent of Fortress 178 assigned here to the Zone Consortium in the north. He's in charge of the planted spies over here. Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt that something was amiss. He said unhappily, that guy's code name is Divine Foresight. No, his code name is Great Hoodwinker. I heard that his code name used to be Divine Foresight, but it was changed to Great Hoodwinker because he's always scamming his comrades of their pay. Ren Xiaosu suddenly did not feel so good. He had believed 80% of the fortune teller's words. But now that he thought about it, it could have been Zhang Jinglan who told him about Ren Xiaosu having kin who was not related to him by blood. And he still had the cheek to say, the northwest is where you will prosper. Could it be that Zhang Jinglan or Wang Fengyuan were channeling their attempts through the Great Hoodwinker to try to make him stay? Regarding the fortune teller's prediction that the Zone Consortium's higher UPS would be gathering these few days, that was probably intel they had received about a meeting that would be held soon. Then, through the fortune teller, Ren Xiaosu would be guided on how to wipe out the Zone Consortium's higher UPS. So when Ren Xiaosu asked this Great Hoodwinker to divine his future for him, the man immediately fell silent. How could someone like that fucking be trusted? But how did the fortune teller know about Li Qingzheng? Could it be that he was also a swindler during the time he spent in the south? Even at this moment, Ren Xiaosu was skeptical about him. He felt that there was something strange about this Great Hoodwinker. Ren Xiaosu asked, has the Great Hoodwinker always been assigned here in the north? I dunno, Zhang Xiaoman replied. Ren Xiaosu felt that he wouldn't get to the bottom of this for the time being, so maybe he should treat his injuries first. While the razor-sharp company was firing at the Zone Consortium's troops, Jiao Xiaochen saw Ren Xiaosu using his fingers to directly extract the bullets out of his wounds. He saw Ren Xiaosu in such great pain that his veins were throbbing. His face was flushed red, but he never made a sound. This group of gruff men from the razor-sharp company were totally shocked. Everyone liked to boast about how they were such warriors, especially when it was politically convenient to be known as a warrior back at Fortress 178. If one could not bear hardship, everyone would make fun of them. But no matter how tough they were, they still wouldn't resort to extracting bullets from their wounds personally. After the Zone Consortium troops were completely defeated, the entirety of Stronghold 146 was a mess. Zhang Xiaoman and the others gathered around Ren Xiaosu. Do you need anesthetics? Your wounds look. But before they could finish speaking, Ren Xiaosu had already extracted the second bullet. He clenched his teeth and applied the black medicine onto his wounds. That's okay, I'll recover in 3 days. All of a sudden, Zhang Xiaoman and the others heard the rumbling of armored vehicles rolling on hard ground. The soldiers of the razor-sharp company were shocked. Fuck, could it be that armored brigade? They had come across the 131st Brigade at the edge of the Zone Consortium's territory. At that time, they were even chased into hiding in a gully on 2 occasions. After the armored brigade left, the captured deputy regimental commander guided the razor-sharp company to plunder a military factory and got their hands on some vehicles. Then they took a shortcut and rushed to Stronghold 146. On the way here, they did not encounter the armored brigade again. As such, they forgot about them. But when they heard the sound of the armored vehicles, Zhang Xiaoman and the others looked horrified. No matter how ferocious they were earlier, they could not possibly face an armored brigade head-on. Run! Let's get out of here quickly! Zhang Xiaoman roared. Ren Xiaosu asked weakly, "What's the matter?" "I don't have time to explain. Get into the vehicle." With that, a group of people carried Ren Xiaosu into their vehicle. Then they stepped on the gas and drove off in the opposite direction of the armored brigade. The Zone Consortium troops in front were taking cover at a corner of the street to discuss their countermeasures. The only remaining regimental commander of the Zone Consortium's combat brigade was trying to contact the Zone Consortium's higher UPS, but he realized he could not reach any one of them. But when they heard the roaring of engines, someone peeked out and nearly pissed his pants. "They're charging! Regimental commander, they're charging!" The regimental commander also quietly sneaked a peek and was surprised to see the razor-sharp company's vehicles speeding towards them. The regimental commander nearly pissed his pants as well. "Run, run, run!" All of a sudden, the entire stronghold was plunged into chaos again. However, he was very familiar with the structure of the Zone Consortium's military forces. He immediately noticed the insignia of those troops and realized it was the 131st Brigade. Didn't these troops get fucking led away by Zone Wu? Why had they come back here again? The situation in the stronghold right now was basically this: the defeated Zone Consortium troops were being pursued by the razor-sharp company, which in turn was being pursued by the armored brigade. It was total pandemonium with everyone driving their vehicles around in panic. The Zone Consortium troops at the front were driving hastily as they were scared out of their wits by the razor-sharp company. They did not even stop their vehicles for a moment as they fled from the east to the west. After driving for more than 10 kilometers, they were about to reach the west gate. Suddenly, the west gate opened. It seemed that some of the Zone Consortium soldiers were also starting to abandon their posts and had opened the gate to escape. The regimental commander of the Zone Consortium troops said in a trembling voice, "Of all the troops in the stronghold, why must they chase us?" A soldier suddenly said, "I think I hear the sound of armored vehicles and tanks behind us." The regiment commander grew ever more flustered. "What? Fortress 178's armored brigade has arrived as well." They could not even see what the situation behind them was, much less notice the unit insignia of the pursuing troops at the rear. As the regimental commander held a very high rank in the military, he knew full well that there were no friendly troops in the vicinity. Therefore, he assumed the sound of the armored vehicles belonged to Fortress 178. As they fled in panic, their ability to think rationally was destroyed. Although it was unrealistic that Fortress 178's campaign would have reached here already, these troops could no longer think properly. If even Stronghold 146 could be rampaged through by a lone supernatural being, what was impossible? Zheng Yuandong was stunned by this sight. He watched with his own eyes as the three forces tried to overtake each other until all of them finally disappeared into the distance. "Whatever, it's none of my business. I'll just return to the Qing Consortium." The entire northwest had descended into chaos. If Zheng Yuandong wanted to leave, now was the best time to do so. After the razor-sharp company and armored brigade exited from the stronghold's west gate, they started driving south. The Zone Consortium troops ahead of them were nearly driven to despair. Didn't they already escape from the stronghold? So why were those people still chasing after them? Did they not want Stronghold 146 anymore? Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company did not stop driving or attack the vehicles in front of them. They were clearly very close to the enemy ahead of them, but there was only one path, and it was only wide enough for two vehicles to drive side by side on. If any vehicles ahead of them rolled over, the razor-sharp company would get caught between the wreck and the armored brigade behind them. Suddenly, one of the Zone Consortium soldiers took a look behind. The vehicles they're driving look like those from our military. Could they share the same radio frequency? The regimental commander turned around to have a look and realized it was true. He immediately had the soldier in the passenger seat try every frequency to see if he could get in touch with the razor-sharp company and discuss some workaround to the situation. Sure enough, after he switched to an encrypted frequency and shouted into it, a reply came from the other end. The regimental commander was overjoyed. "Friends from Fortress 178, please don't pursue us anymore. We'll be retiring to the countryside to farm, so can you guys please stop?" However, the other party answered, "No." The regimental commander turned furious and shouted, "Do you really have to be so ruthless?" The soldiers of the razor-sharp company looked at each other, then at the armored brigade not too far behind them, and realized they did not know how to respond. The Zone Consortium troops in the front roared, "Then surely we can stop our vehicles. We'll surrender. Fortress 178 doesn't kill captives, right?" Zhang Xiaoman was starting to get anxious. "No stopping, keep driving. If you dare stop, I'll kill you. There's only one fucking road out here and the shoulder's full of muck, so if y'all stopped here, wouldn't we get blocked as well?" When the regimental commander in front heard this, tears of humiliation rolled down his cheeks. "Why aren't you accepting our surrender? Must you really force us to flee? Could those fucking Fortress 178 troops think that it's fun to torture us like this?" That might be possible, but at this moment, one of the soldiers finally saw a full view of the armored brigade that was the farthest back while making a large turn. He wondered, "Wait a minute, isn't that armored brigade in the rear our comrades?" "What?" The regimental commander was surprised. He did not care about the danger anymore and peeked out to look back. The paint on the exterior of the armored brigade clearly showed them to be their Zone Consortium troops. The regimental commander picked up the vehicle's walkie-talkie and started laughing arrogantly. "To the pursuing troops of Fortress 178, my advice to you all is to surrender quickly. You're clearly surrounded by us, so what are you trying to bluff?" But just as he finished speaking, he was greeted by a hail of bullets from behind. The regimental commander was so frightened that his hands trembled again. Zhang Xiaoman's voice came from over the radio, "My advice to you is to keep driving. We don't know if anything will happen to us, but if you dare stop, y'all will definitely be the first to suffer." The Zone Consortium's regimental commander nearly started shedding tears of humiliation again. He swore into the walkie-talkie and said that the razor-sharp company would definitely pay the price, and that the Zone Consortium's troops behind them would never let them off. On the razor-sharp company's side, Jiao Xiaochen sat in the back of a truck and wondered, "Wait a minute, even though we're in range of the tank behind us, why didn't they open fire at us? Furthermore, the Zone Consortium's armored brigade is way too quiet back there." Zhang Xiaoman said unhappily, "Something must be wrong with them. Why else would we have gotten forced into taking cover in the gully twice without being attacked? I think they should have discovered us back then, but I wonder why they didn't open fire on us." At that, Ren Xiaosu widened his eyes. "Tell me, what happened?" Jiao Xiaochen related the incident and said curiously, "I feel that something strange is going on." A conjecture popped into Ren Xiaosu's mind. He ordered, "Turn, let's not follow these defeated Zone Consortium troops anymore. The armored brigade behind us probably isn't here to attack us but to chase after the Zone Consortium's troops in front of us." Then the Zone Consortium's troops in front saw the razor-sharp company turning into the wilderness through their rear-view mirrors. The regimental commander immediately felt a sense of relief. He had been saved. But after being chased around like a dog for so long, how could he just let the matter rest? The regiment commander shouted to his soldiers, "They've been intimidated by us, but we can't just let them escape like that." After the razor-sharp company departed, the Zone Consortium troops were the only ones left in front of the armored brigade. With a loud boom, the armored brigade's tank to their rear opened fire. The Zone Consortium's regimental commander was stunned. He could only watch helplessly as the truck at the back of his convoy suddenly turned into a fireball. "What's going on?" The soldiers started crying. "Regimental commander! The armored brigade is here to attack us." Although Ren Xiaosu and the razor-sharp company were also driving the Zone Consortium's vehicles, they were dressed in refugee clothing. Therefore, even though the armored brigade was chasing after the Zone Consortium troops from behind, they could not indiscriminately kill the innocent razor-sharp company that was blocking their way. But once the razor-sharp company departed from the chase, the armored brigade immediately started firing at the Zone Consortium troops. How could a group of rooted soldiers stand up to a full armored brigade? Or rather, the strongest defensive unit that remained across the Zone Consortium's strongholds in the entire Northwest right now was Stronghold 146's Garrison Brigade, with the rest of the Zone Consortium troops still involved in the battle at the front lines. Therefore, the 131st Brigade did not have any worthy opponents in the rear. The soldiers of the 131st Brigade were sitting quietly in the armored vehicles. As they had not rested for a long time, dark circles were appearing under their eyes. But they could not sleep, at least not until the moment they were finally at death's door. The razor-sharp company watched as the armored brigade drove off, then turned to look at Ren Xiaosu. What's happening? Ren Xiaosu thought for a while. I think someone called Li Shenton might be controlling them. Ren Xiaosu did not have any actual proof of that, though. Even though their razor-sharp company was clearly within range of the armored brigade, they did not get fired upon. Ren Xiaosu just felt that something was off. It was just his intuition. Thinking of what he had witnessed back at the Li Consortium's stronghold, the people who were hypnotized by Li Shenton would basically push themselves to their limits as though they had gone crazy, so this armored brigade would probably not last much longer either. Seeing that the armored brigade was heading straight for the next stronghold, Ren Xiaosu thought that Li Shenton might have just done Fortress 178 a huge favor. Or was Li Shenton's intention actually to help Ren Xiaosu? But no matter what, this armored brigade would definitely bring a great surprise to the Zone Consortium. Ren Xiaosu asked, "How's the war going for Commander Zhang and the others in the south?" "It's still going well, but the Zone Consortium is putting up quite a resistance on the battlefront. Although we'll definitely win, there'll have to be some sacrifices on our side as well." Zhang Xiaoman sighed. "Besides, Xiaosu, the Zone Consortium will definitely plunge into chaos now that you've killed more than half of their higher UPS, Jiao Xiaochen said. When Ren Xiaosu heard that Fortress 178 could win the war, he felt more at ease. However, the deputy commander who had been captured by them said, that might not be the case. Zone Ying is the frontline commander of the zone forces, so he's still pretty well respected by the military. Besides, he's been expanding his influence in recent years too. Because of that, the zone higher UPS have kept him in check for the past 3 years. Now that the zone higher UPS are no longer in control, who knows? He might just take the opportunity to consolidate the Zone Consortium and become the new that won't do. I'll have to inform the commander about this, interrupted Zhang Xiaoman. Then he dialed a number on the satellite phone and repeated the deputy commander's words to Wang Fengyuan. However, Wang Fengyuan said, "Don't worry, Zone Ying won't survive beyond tonight." After saying that, Wang Fengyuan hung up. Zhang Xiaoman and the others exchanged glances. Ren Xiaosu said, "It seems like Commander Zhang has a plan to deal with him." Truth be told, Fortress 178 did have contingency plans for that. Ever since Su Xianchuo ambushed the Zone Consortium troops in the Gobi, those contingency plans started taking effect one after another. For example, there were still quite a few lucky survivors from the Zone Consortium's third ancillary branch in Stronghold 146 who were looking to escape, but they were suddenly met by that fortune teller who stopped them from leaving. At the front lines, Zone Ying did not even know danger was approaching. After being in hiding for over a decade, Zhang Jinglan had destroyed the Zone Consortium as soon as he returned to the northwest. From this moment on, Fortress 178 would no longer have any opponents in the northwest. Only the Qing Consortium and Fortress 178 remained in the entire southwest and northwest, which were separated by a river. If anyone else had gone to ask Wang Fengyuan, he would definitely not have revealed anything to them. Only the razor-sharp company could receive such treatment and get some information out of him. Not everyone was capable of destroying Stronghold 146. When the Fortress 178 commanders at the front lines heard that Stronghold 146 in the north had been taken by the razor-sharp company, jealous expressions appeared on their faces. Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company had completed their mission. There was basically nothing left for them to do on the battlefield. The razor-sharp company had already received their orders to march back south to rendezvous with Zhou Yinglong's forward strike battalion, where they would reorganize themselves before returning to Fortress 178. Zhang Xiaoman said happily, "We'll definitely earn the Nebula Medal this time, since half the zone higher UPS were killed by our razor-sharp company. We're clearly just a company, yet it feels like we're a brigade instead." Tui. Jiao Xiaochen scolded jokingly, "You're such a shameless captain. What we achieved was obviously all Ren Xiaosu's credit. What has it got anything to do with you? Without Ren Xiaosu, we might not even have survived to now. But Ren Xiaosu is also part of our razor-sharp company." Zhang Xiaoman said unhappily, "We're in the same unit, understand?" As the exhausted soldiers of the razor-sharp company sat in the vehicle, they felt a sense of relief. Everyone knew the war in the northwest was finally coming to an end. The remaining battles had nothing to do with them. But when everyone thought back on the details, it seemed like it was just as Jiao Xiaochen had described. If Ren Xiaosu were not around in this war, they would probably have died long ago. They had captured Mt Dingyuan and Mt Guan, attacked the Buan River to distract the enemy's firepower from the main forces, crossed the river at Mt Chienguan into the Zone Consortium's territory, took out the logistic lines of Stronghold 144, wrecked their military factories, and eventually destroyed Stronghold 146 entirely. It was no wonder the commanders at the front lines felt a little jealous. Although the razor-sharp company did not really engage in any tough battles, they had done more than what most of the other fighting forces had contributed, and all of this was even achieved with only 184 of them. Someone sneaked a glance at Ren Xiaosu, who was sitting in the vehicle. After this war, there would probably be no one who would not be convinced by Ren Xiaosu, right? Of course, Ren Xiaosu was still far from being qualified as the fortress commander, since knowing how to fight and being an able commander were two different matters. But there was still plenty of time in the future. Everyone felt that this young man would grow up to be like Zhang Jinglan and become the backbone of Fortress 178 someday. Ren Xiaosu, meanwhile, quietly leaned back in his seat and watched the dust and smoke get swept up by the strong wind in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking right now. When the troops were about to arrive at the rendezvous point, it was already evening. Zhou Yinglong had been waiting at the entrance of the camp for a long time. Not only Zhou Yinglong, but Wang Fengyuan, Zhang Jinglan, and the other important commanders were here as well. The rendezvous point was the northern headquarters of Fortress 178. After Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company jumped out of the vehicles and limped, Zhou Yinglong kicked him and said, "Why are you pretending to be injured when you're not?" Zhang Xiaoman quickly stood to attention and said with a cheeky smile, "It makes us appear even more valiant, no?" As they spoke, the razor-sharp company assembled behind Zhang Xiaoman. Zhang Xiaoman shouted, "Count off. 1. 2. 182. Throughout the counting off, the voices of the razor-sharp company's soldiers were sonorous. However, the count-off ended at 182. Zhang Xiaoman thought that something was not right. Why are we short one person? There should be 184 of them in total, including Zhang Xiaoman himself. But why was one of them missing? Jiao Xiaochen wondered, "Hey, wait a minute, where's Ren Xiaosu?" "That's right. Where's Ren Xiaosu?" Zhang Jinglan stood calmly in front of the formation. Many of the commanders had only stayed behind because they wanted to see what that legendary Ren Xiaosu looked like. But in the end, Ren Xiaosu had disappeared? Zhou Yinglong looked at Zhang Xiaoman. "What's wrong with you? How could you lose Ren Xiaosu?" Zhang Xiaoman was also starting to get anxious. "Did any of you see Ren Xiaosu just now?" Yes, he was still around a moment ago. He was just sitting there in the bed of the truck. I dunno where he suddenly disappeared to. Yeah, I saw him as well. Zhang Jinglan sighed. Never mind, leave him be. Zhang Jinglan knew that Ren Xiaosu had temporarily joined Fortress 178 because of the Zone Consortium. But it was also because of the destruction of the Zone Consortium that he had left again. His heart did not belong here, after all. Wang Fengyuan whispered, could he really have felt estranged? Zhang Jinglan shook his head and said, it's not important. Then Zhang Jinglan looked at Zhang Xiaoman and said, carry on. Zhang Xiaoman stood to attention and swung his hand up energetically close to his ear in a salute. Reporting in, Commander. The razor-sharp company has assembled. Zhang Xiaoman was full of pride when he spoke. But now that the razor-sharp company was short one person, he somehow felt very empty and miserable inside. Ren Xiaosu actually left without bidding farewell. Thinking back on the times they spent together for the past month or so, the difficulties and dangers they faced were deeply imprinted in their minds. As he kept speaking, Zhang Xiaoman grew depressed. Zhou Yinglong snapped at him, haven't we already won the war? So what's with that expression of yours? Battalion Commander, sir. We had made an agreement that no man would get left behind, but we've failed to bring Ren Xiaosu back with us. Everyone suddenly fell silent. No one had ever expected that the entire razor-sharp company would truly survive the war. The dying sun blood red. 1-1 This is the last line from the CI poem, Lushan Pass, by Mao Zedong. Mao wrote this poem after the Red Army defeated the KMT after a fierce battle and occupied the pass. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/lushan_pass Fierce the west wind, wild geese cry under the frosty morning moon. Under the frosty morning moon horses' hooves clattering, bugles sobbing low. Idle boast the strong pass is a wall of iron, with firm strides we are crossing its summit. We are crossing its summit, the rolling hills sea blue, the dying sun blood red. But instead of taking the main road, this vehicle suddenly made a detour at some point and drove into the extensive mountain range. The young man deliberately parked the off-road vehicle in an extremely remote place and got out. He took out all of his belongings before pushing them over into a ravine. He probably did this so no one would discover his whereabouts. This young man was extremely careful and took so many precautions to hide his tracks. In fact, to avoid whatever he was trying to avoid, he even planned to trek across the treacherous mountain range. The young man wore a backpack. The water and food he had inside were enough for him to trek all the way to the central plains on foot. Suddenly, this young man turned his head and looked at his homeland with a hint of nostalgia and hatred on his face. He promised himself that he would return someday. But when he turned back around, someone on a small hill in the mountain range ahead smiled at him and said, "What are you looking at?" The young man was shocked. He turned around and drew a pistol from his waist, ready to shoot. He reacted like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. But as he turned around, the man sitting on the hill chuckled and snapped his fingers. Then the young man's face turned blank. "Let's play a game," Li Shenton said with a smile. "The game is called 20 questions. So, what's your name?" "Zong Cheng, Zong Xiang," the young man answered. Li Shenton was stunned. "Why do you have two names? Besides, Zong Cheng doesn't look like you." "I used to be called Zong Xiang, but now I'm known as Zong Cheng," the young man answered. "I planted a seed within Zong Xiang with my superpower and turned him into a puppet." Li Shenton was a little surprised. Even he did not expect that Zong Cheng would possess such a power. Thinking about it, wouldn't this mean that Zong Cheng would be as good as immortal as long as he planted a part of his consciousness in others? Furthermore, the Zone Consortium's members had probably not realized this was something that could be done. Within the Zone Consortium, both Zong Cheng and Zong Xiang could be considered competitors. Since there could only be one patriarch of the organization, there would have to be clearly defined winners and losers. Both Zhongcheng and Zhongxiang were from the main branch of the family. Previously, some people from the third and fourth ancillary branches tried to sow discord between them, but little did they know that Zhongcheng had put Zhongxiang under his control a long time ago. Moreover, Zhongxiang continued living in the Zhong consortium like a normal person, so no one discovered that something like that could have happened. This power was way too strange. If the other organization's leaders were to also fall under Zhongcheng's control, wouldn't it be extremely easy for him to bring them down? Although Zhongcheng could only control a small number of people, Li Shenton had not expected this power could actually get branched into a different power. Li Shenton asked, "Do you have any other seeds out there? Is it the same for everyone you gain control over?" "No," Zhongxiang said, "the seeds are extremely rare. Only by controlling a fixed group of people for an extended time can I draw on their mental strength to create the seeds. There was supposed to be another seed out there, but I didn't have the chance to use it." "That's good," Li Shenton said with a smile, "it's such a disgrace that I have a similar power as someone like you." At this point, a flash of anger and struggle appeared on Zhongxiang's face. It was as though he was trying to break free from Li Shenton's control. But before he could really react, his consciousness was once again suppressed by Li Shenton. Li Shenton's superpower seemed to be a natural nemesis against other mind-controlling supernatural beings such as Zhongcheng. Li Shenton posed a few more questions to him regarding the Zone Consortium's war efforts and found out that the Zone Consortium was plagued by multiple crises and could no longer resist Fortress 178. He also found out about how the 131st Brigade had gone back to Stronghold 146 and caused a huge ruckus there. Li Shenton said with a helpless smile, "To think that rather than helping, I nearly got in his way instead? But what happened sounds quite interesting." To someone like Li Shenton, interesting things had become something he looked forward to in life. "All right." Li Shenton thought for a moment and said, "That's it for my questioning. You can end your life now." When he said that, Zhongxiang's expression suddenly distorted. It seemed like there was a constant struggle between unacceptance and anger within him. Li Shenton sighed and said, "It seems that I'm still not strong enough to make a supernatural being choose between life and death." Then Li Shenton picked up a stone and flicked it between Zhongxiang's eyes. Only at this time could Zhongcheng be considered truly dead. Off to the side, Ren looked at Zhongxiang's corpse, used to seeing things like this. "Big brother Shenton, where do we go now?" "To Fortress 178. No." Li Shenton shook his head and said, "I think Ren Xiaosu will probably leave the Fortress 178 troops very soon. That's not where he wants to be, at least not for now." "Then where are we going?" "We should go and do something more interesting," Li Shenton said with a smile. He looked at the case on Ren's back and teased, "When they said you were a carrying pole back then, I didn't believe it at first." Ren wrinkled her nose. "I'm not a carrying pole. Stop calling me that." "Sure, little carrying pole." Li Shenton turned around and headed off in the direction of the Central Plains. Hu Shuo was nowhere to be seen, and no one knew where he had gone. The war in the north continued. Zhong Ying, the commander at the front lines, immediately summoned all of the Zone Consortium's generals at the battlefront to a meeting after receiving news that Stronghold 146 was in trouble. But the moment the generals stepped into the headquarters, they were immediately arrested. Then Zhong Ying arranged for his trusted aide to carry out the consolidation process. Of the generals here, Zhong Ying had the most troops under him. The other generals had not expected Zhong Ying to be so ruthless and decisive to arrest them immediately after trouble broke out back at Stronghold 146. Zhong Ying said to them, "The Zone Consortium is currently facing a crisis, so we need to be united." What he meant by united was that they should submit to Zhong Ying and let him lead them. And since everyone was arrested, they could not refuse his proposal to unite together. The Zone Consortium's generals looked at one another. They were not expecting Zhong Ying to immediately bare his fangs now that the majority of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS had been taken out or injured. But one of the generals could not understand. We've already been defeated in the war. Even if you control all of the frontline troops now, you still can't win against Fortress 178, isn't that so? We'll head north. Zhong Ying said, we have to continue marching north of Stronghold 146. This place isn't safe anymore. We can rebuild when we get farther north and wait for our chance to make a comeback. The generals were taken aback. Was Zhong Ying planning on bringing everyone to the northern steppe? Were they supposed to completely abandon everything they currently had? Not only that, Zhong Ying was even planning to take these frontline troops on a pillaging expedition as they made their way north. They would take whatever valuable items from the Zone Consortium's strongholds and turn them into ruins. As for what would happen to the stronghold residents after that, it was something for Fortress 178 to consider. Someone asked, how should we shake off the pursuit from the Fortress 178 troops? I'll have Zhong Xing to help me deal with them, of course. If we head another 170 kilometers north, we'll arrive at Fuzi Bridge. After we cross it, we can blow up the bridge. Since it will take several days for Fortress 178 to build a pontoon bridge, there'll be enough time for us to make our retreat, Zhong Ying explained. Zhong Xing was one of the few veteran generals left in the Zone Consortium. When everyone started to withdraw from the front lines, Zhong Xing still held his ground and fought for every inch of territory. Normally, neither the younger generals nor the veteran generals were too fond of each other. The veterans always felt that the young ones did not feel a sense of belonging to the clan. But what Zhong Ying uttered here decided the fate of Zhong Xing. Zhong Ying looked at the Zone Consortium's generals and said with a smile, there'll always be a need for sacrifices in war. Of course, what I mean is the sacrifice of others. In reality, Zhong Ying had already been scheming to retreat north for some time. He had not expected things to go so smoothly and that someone would actually give him a hand in getting rid of the majority of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS. The northern steppe was situated outside of the stronghold perimeter. It was a place where wild beasts ran rampant. But what threat could those wild beasts possibly pose to professional soldiers? His second-in-command said, a lot of our troops have deserted over the past few days, but they've all been caught and killed. Well, it's very normal that some people tried to escape. Zhong Ying said with a smile, in their opinion, they would rather become refugees than go north to herd sheep. Don't worry, killing a few people and streamlining our troops as we make our way there isn't exactly a bad thing, and we can make use of it to intimidate the other soldiers as well. After all, it'll be a tough life from now on. For now, Zhong Ying wanted to use an extreme form of coercion to band these rooted Zone Consortium troops together and bring them north. These troops would be his investment. They wouldn't even need an armored brigade once they get to the northern steppe. After all, mechanized troops would be useless without fuel. His second-in-command asked, Commander, when can we return here? We'll return when Fortress 178 and the Qing Consortium start fighting. Zhong Ying laughed and said, no two tigers can share the same mountain, so there'll definitely come such a day. How can Qing Zhen possibly give up on the lucrative north when he's such an ambitious person? Let's go, we'll just wait and see. In truth, Zhong Ying did not know whether he could return here. Even if Fortress 178 and the Qing Consortium started fighting, the Zone Consortium would not have the strength to re-enter the stage. They would only be able to watch others perform on the stage while waiting in the wings. But politics was always a mixture of truth and lies. Even if Zhong Ying did not have any intention of returning, he could not tell his soldiers. Only by giving these people a glimmer of hope would he be allowed the time to consolidate his power. All of a sudden, a water arrow shot out from the river under the bridge. Zhong Ying was utterly shocked when he sensed danger. No one expected such a surprising turn of events to happen here. This was an attack by a supernatural being. Zhong Ying quickly pulled his second-in-command in front of him to block the water arrow attack. But when the water arrow was about to hit, it suddenly lost shape and transformed into many fine water needles. Zhong Ying hid his entire body behind his second-in-command. In that instant, his second-in-command was riddled by the needles. The nearby supernatural being who was responsible for protecting Zhong Ying finally reacted and spat a cloudy mist. The cloudy mist transformed into a majestic hawk in the air and hovered over Zhong Ying's head, ready to protect him at all times. But before Zhong Ying could breathe a sigh of relief, a huge, translucent killer whale jumped out of the turbulent river and leaped over the bridge. The killer whale was formed from water. As it leaped over everyone's heads and landed back into the river, it caught the hawk in midair and dragged it down into the water. The supernatural being next to Zhong Ying coughed up blood and collapsed to the ground with a depressed look. However, the attack did not stop there. Suddenly, some dark clouds started gathering in the sky and snowflakes began falling. The falling snowflakes were as sharp as blades, and they quickly pierced through Zhong Ying's chest before disintegrating into nothingness. Zhong Ying fell to the ground. This ambitious general of the Zone Consortium failed to realize his ambitions in the end. But there was nothing much to feel indignant about before he died. The supernatural attack he witnessed here today was obviously not done by a single person. Several supernatural beings had worked together to ensure he was killed. And the variation of attacks in the water clearly told Zhong Ying that his successful destruction of the pontoon bridge at Blackstone River that day was just a deception to trick him into thinking that Fortress 178 was out of retreating options, and it was not that they could do nothing about those speedboats he sent. Before Zhong Ying died, he gave a mental sigh. The old era was over, after all. After being briefed, Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jinglan and said, "Commander, Zhong Ying is dead. Just as you had expected, they were intending to leave via Fuzi Bridge. Commander's foresight is amazing." Zhang Jinglan said with a smile, "So you've also learned how to flatter others, hey? If their intentions were to shake us off, that was the only route they could have taken. This isn't about having amazing foresight." Everyone thought Fortress 178 did not really have any supernatural beings in their service, but that was not the case at all. In Wang Fengyuan's words, their superpowers came from being frozen. The soldiers had suffered daily hardships at the border outposts. In winter, their breaths would even condense into ice when they exhaled. That freezing and harsh environment hammered out their strongest willpower. But it was not enough to just freeze. They also had to possess the most sincere belief in the world. Did the soldiers choose to be in such a harsh environment for themselves? Of course not. Was it for meritorious service and promotion? It was not that either. They did it because they wanted to protect the stronghold. Therefore, belief and hardship were indispensable factors for the awakening of their superpowers. Yang Xiaojun had once said to Ren Xiaosu, "When a disaster comes, mental strength becomes the highest caliber of weapon humanity has in the face of danger." While wild animals evolved to become stronger, and plants turned more bizarre, what was it that humans had? Evolution of mental strength was the proper path for humans to embark on. But of course, it didn't mean that everyone would become supernatural beings just because they had suffered hardships. The secret force in Fortress 178 that was made up of supernatural beings was also another secret that Wang Fengyuan kept. Wang Fengyuan continued, "Commander, the frontline troops have captured a supernatural being. He's the one that can locate other supernatural beings. According to him, he found an opportunity to escape after the 131st Brigade defected. He intended to return to the front line at Mt. Wuchuan, but he got captured by us instead." "Oh." Zhang Jinglan's interest was piqued. "Bring him in." Then the supernatural being was pushed into the headquarters by several people outside. It was a plump young man, and he was shouting, "I can help you guys locate other supernatural beings. After you find them, you can round them up and place them under your control. I'm very useful, so don't kill me." Zhang Jinglan asked him with great interest, "What is your effective detection range?" "I can locate any supernatural being within the radius of 100 kilometers. The delicate-looking supernatural being shouted, there must be more supernatural beings hidden in Fortress 178. I can help you to find them. Zhang Jinglin nodded and said to Wang Fengyuan, bring him to Fortress 178 and see if we can locate any other supernatural beings living there. However, there's no need to force them to join us. Just record their powers in a register. Sun Yu's eyes widened. You're only registering them? Aren't you going to place them under your control so they'll work for you? Our Fortress 178 does not need to resort to restricting the freedom of others in exchange for their strength. Zhang Jinglin said with a smile, have a nice stay in Fortress 178, and don't get yourself involved in the war anymore. Then Zhang Jinglin had someone take Sun Yu away. The Zone Consortium had completely lost control of their strongholds in the north. Actually, Zhang Jinglin knew that Zone Ying would withdraw from the front line, but he did not try to stop him. If those troops put up a fierce resistance at Mt Wuchuan, it would only serve to increase the casualties that Fortress 178 suffered. Furthermore, since Zone Ying had taken the initiative to pull out of the battlefield with his troops, would the remaining generals who harbored their own plans be able to organize an effective resistance the moment Zone Ying died? Some of them would simply occupy a stronghold in hopes they could become the overseer. But once the Fortress 178 army arrived, these people would immediately lose will and surrender the stronghold. Everything they did was futile in the face of overwhelming strength. Fortress 178 had already deployed an extremely professional team to handle the takeover of the strongholds. This unit had a very clear purpose and operated meticulously. They would forcefully clean up the old ruling hierarchy in the strongholds by killing them. This directive had been established long ago, as Fortress 178 did not have time to deal with such pests courteously. At this moment, Wang Shenzi's organization sent another delegation to discuss the matter of opening up the transportation lifeline with Fortress 178. Previously, they did not have an in-depth discussion about it because Zhang Jinglin had yet to conquer the entire northwest. The consortium Wang Shenzi belonged to was extremely influential and powerful in the Central Plains, and they formed a triumvirate with two other consortiums. The remaining consortiums in the region simply served to accentuate the big three, or perhaps, just had no ambitions to expand further. Therefore, Wang Shenzi previously stated to Zhang Jinglin that both sides would get their demands. Fortress 178 wanted the resources of the Central Plains, while the Central Plains was eyeing the resources that Fortress 178 had. However, the Wang clan would only deal with whoever was fully in control of the northwest. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. Although Wang Shenzi had rushed to make the trip to the northwest, it did not mean he would bend his principles to reach a deal. Now that Zhang Jinglin had become the ruler of the Northlands, they could finally start discussing all kinds of deals. However, Zhang Jinglin simply smiled and expressed that he was not qualified to be the ruler of the Northlands. How could a frail scholar be worthy of such a title? But someday, a new ruler would surely appear in the northwest, and that was something that even he was eagerly awaiting. The representatives of the Wang clan were a little surprised. Why did the words "a new ruler would surely appear someday" sound like what the ancient tribes would say? And it even carried a hint of feudal superstition too? Zhang Jinglin said with a smile, "That was what our great hoodwinker claimed, but I believe that person will definitely return someday." There were only a few key points brought up in the discussion. They first talked about the minerals and resources Wang Shenzi needed, then discussed how to set the prices and what resources would be exchanged between the two sides, as well as how to collect the tariffs. Then they proceeded to talk about how to build the controlled access highway to link up the northwest and the Central Plains and how it would be managed. Wang Shenzi's intention was that they would take charge of restoring all the Achis ways, whether it was the railway or the highway. However, Zhang Jinglin rejected Wang Shenzi's goodwill and expressed that the northwestern people should resolve the issues in the northwest by themselves. The northwestern people would restore the northwestern Achis ways, while the Central Plains people would repair the Central Plains portion. That way, neither party would be on the losing side. Third, Wang Shenzi proposed they send troops to expel the wild beasts in the vicinity of the trading routes so as not to affect the safety. However, that offer was also turned down by Zhang Jinglin. Seeing that they were planning to construct a railway that led to the central plains from the northwest, the commanders of the fighting forces of Fortress 178 did not know whether it was a good thing or not. But in the end, Zhang Jinglin still felt it would not be feasible for them to remain content with staying here in the corner of the northwest for the long term. If they had to face the enemies further northwest, they would have to obtain the resources they were lacking to progress. What surprised Zhang Jinglin was that Wang Shenjian, the younger sister of Wang Shenzi, was still part of the delegation this time. Wang Shenjian was also a little fatigued after having to travel back here again from the central plains. But when she arrived at the headquarters of Fortress 178, she pretended to casually ask about Ren Xiaosu's whereabouts. She asked why she had not seen Ren Xiaosu around, and if he was injured or had been killed in action. It was only then that she learned of all the things Ren Xiaosu had done in the north, including his departure from Fortress 178 without farewell. Even the people of Fortress 178 did not know where Ren Xiaosu had gone. Wang Shenjian appeared a little crestfallen at this. At the same time the visitors from the Wang clan were here. Luo Lan represented the Qing consortium and also dropped by the Northlands. He was here to discuss an alliance between them and Fortress 178. Luo Lan's offer was clear: both sides would get along as friendly neighbors and not interfere with each other's affairs, as well as cooperate with each other to guard against the Central Plains. In other words, he regarded the Central Plains as potential enemies and wanted to prevent them from plotting against the southwest and northwest. Of course, there were also disagreements about this among the commanders of Fortress 178. The Qing consortium is overly ambitious. They can't afford to deal with us yet as they are currently busy taking over the Li consortium and Yang consortium's strongholds. If we get along peacefully with them now, what'll happen when they start a war with us in the future? That's right. I heard that the experimentals in the south are giving them a headache. After the Qing consortium's main forces captured the front line at Xiang, they immediately turned around and headed back south. This shows that the Qing consortium does not have the capacity to deal with us for now. That's why they're suggesting that we get along peacefully. Zhang Jinglin glanced at them and said, I've already made up my mind to sign an alliance treaty with the Qing consortium. However, there's one condition we must reject. We cannot allow the Qing consortium to build their railway to connect with ours. Wang Fengyuan said in a low voice, Commander, the concerns everyone's brought up are valid too. Zhang Jinglin sighed and said, if another war breaks out at this time, wouldn't our situation be the exact same to what the Qing consortium is going through? If we start warring again, the Qing consortium's main forces will immediately be deployed here to the north. Then the south will truly become a paradise for the experimentals. If that happens, who knows how many people will have to die? Wang Fengyuan understood what Zhang Jinglin meant. He intended to let the Qing consortium focus on dealing with the threat of the experimentals first. That was the most crucial matter for now. What else does that fatty Luo want? Zhang Jinglin asked. He's also looking for Ren Xiaosu. Wang Fengyuan said, I told him that Ren Xiaosu has already left our territory. Nearby, one of the generals muttered, why are all of them looking for Ren Xiaosu? This is so odd. Half a month later, the Razor Sharp Company was the first of the troops to return to Fortress 178. When they entered the fortress, the residents lined the streets to welcome them back. Someone held up a red banner that read, Welcome home, war heroes. Zhang Xiaoman wore the Nebula Medal on his chest. This award was the highest honor he could receive in Fortress 178. There was a joyous atmosphere on both sides of the street as children followed behind the military transport trucks. A middle-aged woman stuffed whole baskets of eggs into their vehicles, while Lu Yao, the goddess of the fortress, organized a concert put on by the cultural troupe for these victorious warriors. When Lu Yao saw them, she also asked, which one of you is Ren Xiaosu? However, Zhang Xiaoman and the others were at a loss for words. Looking at the cheering crowd in the fortress, Zhang Xiaoman really wished Ren Xiaosu could be here to enjoy this honor with them. They were only given this honor because of Ren Xiaosu. Zhang Xiaoman had another nebula medal in his possession that belonged to Ren Xiaosu. For now, it would be placed with him for safekeeping. Zhang Xiaoman somehow felt that the young man would return someday. At that time, he would personally help Ren Xiaosu wear the nebula medal. End of volume. Ruler of the Northlands. Next volume, Alliance of Assassins. As such, Stronghold 73 was also known as the Furnace. In an official residence on the north side of Longyang Avenue, some people were arguing endlessly in a clan meeting that was in progress. More than a dozen luxury cars were parked in the square outside the official residence. The chauffeurs were standing in a corner smoking and chatting as they waited for the big shots to come out. Inside the conference room, someone said in a loud voice, "The Wang clan in the north has already opened up their trade route with the northwest. If we let them carry on developing, wouldn't that make us sitting ducks?" Someone retorted, "Don't always be spoiling for a fight. Our priority now should be to continue our spread east. The Qinghe group over there cannot be underestimated." The person who made the retort was a bearded, middle-aged man. He had a calm look on his face, and his black tie and dark blue military uniform made him appear exceptionally solemn. The person who spoke earlier sneered, "Zhou Shiji, the Qinghe group is content with exercising sovereignty within their own territory and has never gotten involved in any competition for resources in the Central Plains. What's there to be afraid of? I don't think you realize yet who our true enemy is. It's not that I deem the Qinghe group to be an enemy, but I've heard that they've mastered how to create superhumans. My opinion's that we should get our hands on a similar method first." The bearded, middle-aged man adjusted the pen and paper in front of him and placed them neatly together. "But they don't seem to have that many superhumans in their organization," someone else countered. "In this current climate, it's time that we start paying more attention to superhumans." Internal strife was playing out between the main and conservative factions of the clan, but this meeting was destined to have no outcome. It took another 2 hours before these Zhou Consortium big shots finally walked out of the official residence. One by one, the important figures from the conservative faction bid farewell to the representative of their faction, Zhou Shiji. There was even someone who invited him for drinks, but he turned them down. As Zhou Shiji walked down the gravel road in front of the official residence, the protocol officers and security personnel were waiting in front of the car. After the protocol officer opened the car door for Zhou Shiji nodded at him before getting into the car. The luxury black car drove out of the official residence with 2 motorcycle escorts in front and behind. The assistant officer sitting in the front passenger seat held a document and said, "The people who met up with the Qinghe group have returned. They said the other party rejected our proposal as usual." Zhou Shiji was resting with his eyes closed and his expression showed no signs of being affected. Someone was watching the movement of the convoy with a pair of military binoculars on a roof of a tall building in the distance. When the person was sure of it, he turned around and brought out 3 white doves from a cage behind him and tossed them into the sky. The sound of the white doves' flapping wings would make anyone joyful. Elsewhere, someone was cautiously hiding in a residence and watching that tall building. When he saw 3 doves taking flight from the tall building, he said to his 3 armed companions next to him, "The target is taking the route that was briefed to us. Get ready to fight. This assassination attempt can only succeed. Failure is unacceptable. Do you think we'll get the chance to join the Anjing House after we pull off this job?" Based on what they said, the Anjing House sounded like an organization rather than a temple. After all, it didn't make sense that one would only be able to join a temple after killing people. But at this moment, a young man suddenly walked out from the shadows next to them. He let out a foul breath and said with a grin, "I've finally found y'all. However, the Anjing House is not a place that characters like you can join." These 4 hitmen quickly pointed their guns at the young man. "Where'd you pop out of? Were you hiding in the kitchen all this while?" Holding a glass of juice in his hand, the young man chuckled softly and said, "Don't get so anxious. Let me finish my juice first." As he spoke, the 4 hitmen's gun barrels twisted like a pastry twist. 5 minutes later, the young man walked out of the building. There was a bright scarlet stain on his white shirt that indicated the fate of the 4 hitmen in the building. He frowned at the sight of the blood stain, then reached up to wipe it clean. When the stronghold bell rang out in the distance, the white doves in Pingan Square got alarmed by the sound and took off into the sky. Then the young man took out a paper crane from his pocket and wrote on it, "Mission accomplished. Please deposit the commission into my account. The targets are extras that don't know who the mastermind is." After the message was written, the paper crane took flight into the sky by itself and crossed the turbulent river, going north. This paper crane would help to bring back news of what had happened here. As it flew among the white doves, it did not look out of place at all. As for where the paper crane would fly to, the young man did not know either. On a mountain road in the north, a young man was trekking across the treacherous mountains. He was moving down the river, apparently searching for something along the way. But at the same time, he seemed afraid he would miss something. The mountains here were yellowish-brown, and only after heading further east did the landscape start transforming into a grassy green. The young man looked a little disappointed when he did not find any tracks here. But it was also a good thing that he did not see any corpses, since that would mean the people he was looking for might still be alive. He walked and walked until half a month had passed. Actually, he could probably have crossed the mountain range within 4 or 5 days if he had traveled at full speed. But as he was searching for tracks along the way, it delayed his travels by quite a bit. The young man slowed when he heard a ruckus up ahead. Before he could walk much further, he saw a group of refugee workers in safety helmets cutting wood. When these workers saw the young man, they were stunned. "Friend, where did you come from? Why did you walk out of the mountain range?" "Actually, I lost my way and got here by accident. I'm from the northwest." The young man said with a smile, "Brothers, where are y'all from?" "We're lumberjack refugees from Stronghold 61. The oldest lumberjack wondered, "The Northwest? A lot of people fleeing there have arrived here recently. I heard that there's a war going on. Did you escape from the war?" "Yes." The young man smiled and said, "I escaped here to get away from the war. The fighting there is too deadly." "Oh, I heard that the superhumans over there are extremely powerful. Someone escaped from Stronghold 146 and is staying in our town. They claimed that Stronghold 146 was destroyed by a young superhuman. Are the superhumans these days that fearsome? They can even destroy a stronghold by themselves." The young man was stunned before replying with a smile, "I dunno about that. I haven't been to Stronghold 146 before." "Oh, news doesn't really flow that well over there, so it's understandable that you don't know about it." The lumberjack nodded. "My name is Su Yawi. If you're lost, you can come back with us later and settle down in town. But you definitely won't be allowed into the stronghold." "Friend, how should I address you?" The young man smiled. "Thank you, bro, I'm Ren Xiaosu." As he followed the river, Ren Xiaosu even saw the settlement where his family used to live and the place where Yang Xiaojin taught him how to use a sniper rifle. But times changed, and things were no longer as they used to be. Ren Xiaosu did not manage to find any leads with regards to Wang Fugui and the others, even though he was about to reach Stronghold 61. One of the lumberjacks sighed and said, "Kid, you sure are lucky. You actually came out alive after getting lost in the mountains." Ren Xiaosu asked, "What's in the mountains?" "There's a herd of boars in there." The lumberjack exclaimed exaggeratedly, "And they're especially ferocious." Ren Xiaosu thought silently, "Is this lumberjack referring to the herd I ate for dinner a few days ago?" But he did not say anything and just played along. "Ah, that was a close call then. Fortunately for me, I didn't encounter them." He asked the lumberjacks as he sat next to them, brothers, do y'all usually work around here? Yes. A lumberjack who just sat down to take a break said, we're chopping down trees for the Wang clan and have been working in this area for the past few months. Years ago, we were logging in the north. However, the Wang clan said that we had to practice sustainable logging and should not chop down trees in the same area. So we got sent here instead. The place where we used to cut wood in the north is being replanted with trees. Someone said with a smile, don't you find it strange? After all that effort to chop down the trees, they're replanting them? I wonder what on earth they're thinking. Ren Xiaosu did not answer that question and continued asking, did you see anyone drifting down from upstream? The lumberjacks paused for a moment. Are you looking for your family? Yes. In fact, bodies often drift down from upstream, probably due to the war in the northwest. But we haven't come across anyone who's still alive by the time they drift all the way here. A lumberjack shook his head. This is the only river that we can still see bodies adrift on. Apparently, this river is formed by the snow melt from the mountains, so there's no carnivorous fishes in it. If it were the other rivers, any bodies would have already been devoured by the fish. Ren Xiaosu's heart stopped for a while and he said nothing more. In reality, he had always been afraid to hear about the bad outcomes. But it did not really matter since he would continue to look for them. Besides, it wasn't like these lumberjacks came here every day. Perhaps they might have just missed them? That was still plausible. The lumberjack looked at Ren Xiaosu. I'll tell you now that although the Wang clan doesn't reject those who flee here from the northwest, nobody's allowed to enter the stronghold. So former stronghold residents like you should be mentally prepared to become refugees like us. You'll only be allowed to do menial work to support your family. Ren Xiaosu said with a smile, brothers, I think y'all gotten the wrong impression. I'm actually a refugee too. When the lumberjacks heard that Ren Xiaosu was also a refugee, they turned friendlier and asked about the differences between refugees in the northwest and those in the central plains. In the end, the lumberjacks came to the conclusion that the refugees in the northwest did not have a better life than them. Although they were also tired from their constant busy lives, being a class lower than the stronghold residents, and distrusting their fellow townspeople, at least they did not have to worry about starving to death or eating moldy cornbread. A lumberjack said with a smile, after a busy day of work here, we can still head back to town and enjoy a bowl of hot lamb stew. If we pay a little more, we can even get to eat a burger too. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. The refugees here can afford to buy meat. Haha, the lamb stew we have is only the broth, as if there's any meat in it. It's great that we can even enjoy meat broth. Realization dawned on Ren Xiaosu. It truly was great to even have meat broth to drink. In comparison, the Central Plains was indeed wealthier than the Southwest and Northwest. This was true since ancient times. In the evening, the leader of the logging team drove back to town with a truckload of wood. As the workers sat on the wood in the back of the truck, someone asked Ren Xiaosu, did you ever meet Fortress 178's troops while you were in the Northwest? We heard from the stronghold residents who fled from the northwest that the Fortress 178 troops are extremely strong, especially that company of soldiers who utterly defeated the Zone Consortium in the north. They even burned their granary. Ren Xiaosu said with a smile, I've only heard about them. I haven't met them before. Come on, tell us about them. Everyone in town's been discussing what's going on in the northwest recently. It sounds even more exciting than the storyteller's tales. Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said, I heard that the company of soldiers did not initially plan on crossing the river to the north, but they thought that it was not good to drag the war on for too long. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility, so they felt that they had the obligation to cross the river to finish the war in the north. But even though the company is powerful, the most powerful one of them is still the supernatural being in their ranks. I heard that he's extremely brave, mighty, and handsome. Later on, he headed north by himself to Stronghold 146. That battle was a storm. By the way, he's that supernatural being y'all were mentioning earlier." As he continued relating the story to them, the lumberjacks got so engrossed they did not notice they were almost back in town. "Hey, we arrived so soon." But at this moment, a strong gust of wind blew past them. It seemed that there was something white flapping its wings in the sky, but it was pushed down by the wind. Ren Xiaosu felt that something was not right, so he jumped up from the truck and grabbed the white object with his hand. When he opened his fist, he was surprised to see a small and exquisite paper crane. The paper crane looked alive and was wriggling its body and glaring at Ren Xiaosu. Although this paper crane did not have any eyes, Ren Xiaosu had this bizarre feeling that the tiny little thing was really staring at him. As the paper crane's wings were extremely sharp, Ren Xiaosu accidentally cut his finger on one. When Ren Xiaosu let go of his hand in pain, the paper crane started flapping its wings again and tried to escape. But before it could fly out of his palm, Ren Xiaosu caught it again. Ren Xiaosu unfolded it curiously. Inside the squarish white piece of paper, a message read, "The war in the north has ended. The Qing Consortium has signed an alliance treaty with Fortress 178. Is someone trying to relay this information to the Central Plains?" Ren Xiaosu wondered. However, even he did not know about the alliance between the Qing Consortium and Fortress 178. Before he could figure it out, a lumberjack asked, "Why would that white paper crane suddenly fly here?" The lumberjacks did not clearly see what Ren Xiaosu did with the paper crane. They just felt that it was a little strange to see it flying here. One baomo is a specialty of Shaanxi cuisine and is a typical food eaten in the city of Xi'an. It is a hot stew of chopped up steamed leavened bread, cooked in lamb broth, and served with lamb meat, sometimes substituted with beef. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/baomo. That's true. Everyone heard what Ren Xiaosu said and did not question him any further. But Ren Xiaosu was actually startled to hear that. He had a feeling that the mysterious organization might just turn out to be real. But how could an organization like this let him intercept their means of communication so easily? Could it be a coincidence? Or was it intentionally arranged? As Ren Xiaosu was cautious by nature, he would always delve further whenever he encountered something strange. But he did not consider whether it would be a problem for anyone else to try to catch the paper crane. Perhaps they might even be killed by the small paper crane if they tried to catch it. He intended to refold the paper crane as he wanted to see if it would try to fly off again. But after unfolding it, Ren Xiaosu realized he did not know how to refold it. He never learned something like this before. So Ren Xiaosu placed the piece of paper into his storage space. The paper crane was probably the power of some supernatural being. Ren Xiaosu turned to look in the direction of Stronghold 61 as that was where it was flying towards. Perhaps that supernatural being was at Stronghold 61 right now? When they reached the entrance of the town, the leader of the logging team parked the truck and jumped out of the vehicle. He said to Ren Xiaosu, "A lot of people in town fled here from the northwest. If you want to find your family, you can start looking for them here. If they're not here," he did not finish the sentence. What the team leader was implying was that if they were not here, they would probably be dead. The team leader said, "I live on the west side of town. If you have nothing to do and want to earn some money, you can come to look for me in the western part of town. It just so happens that we have a lot of work recently." "Thank you, bro, but I don't think I need a job yet." After thanking him, Ren Xiaosu started his search in town. He went looking for Wang Fugui and the others shack by shack. The town here was huge and was many times larger than those he had seen in the southwest and northwest. A lot of the escapees who fled here had already set up their shacks. Many of them had ashen looks on their faces with hints of despair. A lot of these high and mighty stronghold residents were probably unable to accept that they'd suddenly become refugees. Some of them had brought along their money and thought they could continue to live a comfortable life when they got to the Central Plains. However, all of the strongholds under the Wang Consortium had stopped accepting the Zone Consortium's currency. When people came here to do business in the past, the Zone Consortium's currency could be used. However, that was no longer the case. It was as though the Wang Consortium firmly believed that the Zone Consortium would suffer a crushing defeat. As such, these escapees were forced to pawn their gold jewelry in order to survive. One of the stronghold residents was following a refugee and saying he wanted to work to earn some money for food. However, he was rejected by the refugee because he was too old and did not look like he was strong enough to do labor. Some of the stronghold residents scolded these refugees for daring to look down on them. As a result, the refugees gave them a good thrashing and even spat on them. Of course, some stronghold residents quickly accepted their fate and did whatever they could to trade for some food. Although the refugees in the Central Plains had it better than those in the Southwest and Northwest, they still had to work in exchange for food. This was the ironclad rule that was constant everywhere. Ren Xiaosu was disappointed that he could not find any trace of Wang Fugui and the others here. At this moment, he was feeling a little lost. How was he going to look for Wang Fugui and the rest in this sea of people? It was at this moment that a rat-faced worker from the logging team quietly approached Ren Xiaosu and said, "I've been following you around for some time. You haven't found your family yet? That's all right, I have some friends in this place. As long as you have money, they can help you locate them." Ren Xiaosu turned around and saw the lumberjack's eyes looked rather shifty. It seemed that the man had guessed that Ren Xiaosu had some money on him after overhearing the conversation between the team leader and him about not needing a job yet. Ren Xiaosu said with a smile, "I'll be depending on you then. If you can find my family, I'll be sure to reward you handsomely. Follow me then. It's not convenient to talk here in town." Then the lumberjack turned around and led Ren Xiaosu out into the wilderness. Before they could get far, Ren Xiaosu suddenly asked, "How much farther do we have to walk?" "Hehe, we're almost there." As he spoke, the lumberjack arrived at a mound and whistled loudly. Suddenly, 3 people emerged from behind the mound. The lumberjack looked at Ren Xiaosu and said with a smile, "You must be carrying some money on you, right? Hand it over and we'll let you live." Ren Xiaosu wondered, "How many escapees have you robbed using this method? I thought that the people here did not need to shut their doors at night. Wasn't there something known as artificial intelligence here?" Wang Shenjian and Wang Shenzi had said that in the territories controlled by their Wang clan, people did not need to close their doors at night because there was an artificial intelligence that could analyze criminal behavior extremely accurately. Only a few people could avoid getting caught after committing a crime. But it didn't seem like that was the case now. The lumberjack sneered, "That's only applicable in the stronghold. What does it have anything to do with us refugees? Hurry up and hand over all your money." "All right then," Ren Xiaosu muttered. So it turned out the Central Plains were just like the Southwest and Northwest. There was also a clear distinction between refugees and stronghold residents. The lumberjack's vision suddenly went black. Right after, he fell backwards with his chest hurting. The rusty metal knife in his hand dropped to the ground with a clang. His 3 accomplices were no exception either, as all of them suffered a sudden blow. Ren Xiaosu put the 4 of them together and said nicely, "I'll ask y'all some questions." "Well, I'd just like to find out more about the local customs and conditions here in the Central Plains. Don't be too nervous. Just answer the best you can." These refugees who tried to rob Ren Xiaosu realized they had stubbed their toes on an iron plate. No, how could this only be an iron plate? It might as well be a fucking mountain that was several kilometers thick. In this recent period, they had tasted the sweetness by robbing escapees who fled here from the northwest. Moreover, the stronghold residents were very timid and would immediately cower in fear at the sight of a knife. However, they did not expect to rob a superhuman today. When Ren Xiaosu started questioning them, the exchange went on for the entire night. The 4 refugees in front of him nearly broke down from his interrogation. When day broke, he returned to town alone and did nothing but stand at the door of the only tavern in town and waited for it to open. Not only was he hungry and looking for something to eat, he had also heard there was a storyteller here who brought up something about white paper cranes. In this town, there was always a place that pandered to their desires. Zhang Jinglin once said this was a world meticulously designed by the consortiums. It seemed like he was not wrong at all. People watching the refugees, Ren Xiaosu recalled the days when he and Yan Liuyuan were still living in the town at Stronghold 113. Although that period was more difficult than now, it was still exceptionally wonderful in his memory, so much so that he would deliberately forget some of the suffering he had been through, forget about the time when he could not fill his stomach, forget how he was ostracized by others, and forget the feeling of falling asleep in fear. Then, there would only be happy memories left. Humans are optimistic creatures. To this town, Ren Xiaosu was an unfamiliar face. But with the increased number of stronghold residents who had fled here from the northwest in recent days, no one really cared about his arrival. The stronghold residents who had fled here would hide in the corner and worry about their future lives. Suddenly, a young woman ran out of the back door of the tavern with a notebook and pen in hand. She was looking for these escapees to ask them some questions. Ren Xiaosu leaned in close to listen and discovered this young woman was actually asking the escapees from the northwest about the war over there. She wanted to know how the war had started and if there were any heroic deeds that took place or any particularly powerful figures in it. The young woman wasn't asking the escapees to tell her stories about the war for nothing, though. There would be a payment of 1 steamed bun for every story told as an exchange of equal value. Although payment of a single steamed bun sounded really cheap, to these escapees who had no idea of how many meals they had skipped, this bun was worth their life, so they would say everything they knew. A middle-aged man said, "Zone Ying, the commander of the Zone Consortium's front line this time, is still a very capable leader. He used a scheme to make Fortress 178." Interrupting, the girl, around 18 years old, shook her head and said, "Didn't the Zone Consortium already lose? I don't want to hear about the Zone Consortium's side of the story, I only want to listen to what Fortress 178 has done." The middle-aged man blanched and his heart bled. He used to be a bureaucrat in the Zone Consortium's ranks, but as a result of losing the war, he had to drag his family away from his hometown. And, as if that wasn't bad enough yet, he now had to speak heroically of the enemy's deeds. Was this young woman here to fucking add insult to injury? The young woman said earnestly to him, "If you don't have a story to tell, I'll just ask someone else. Grandpa is still waiting." The middle-aged man quickly stopped her from leaving. "I'll tell you, I will. Besides, I used to be a high-ranking official, so I definitely know more details than anyone else. When Stronghold 146 was being destroyed, I was right there myself." The young woman was very happy when she heard that. "Really? Then quickly tell me about it. If it's interesting, I'll give you another steamed bun." When this middle-aged man heard he could get another steamed bun, he immediately started relating the story without a care for his previous status. He was afraid the other escapees would steal this opportunity from him. Once he started, he droned on for more than 2 hours. Ren Xiaosu went next to them and listened. But as he kept listening, his expression became stranger. At the beginning, the middle-aged man was able to relate the story rather factually. He talked about why Fortress 178 wanted to start a war against the Zone Consortium and why the Zone Consortium had been provoking Fortress 178 in recent years. Truly, this middle-aged man was quite the eloquent speaker. His rhetoric was so good that it made people relish listening to him. There were some things that even Ren Xiaosu did not know about. And then he touched on the actual war, from the attack on Mt. Guan and Mt. Dingyuan, to Shishuan village being taken, to the Buin River being broken through, and finally Stronghold 146 getting destroyed. All of those incidents revolved around Ren Xiaosu. While he was on the subject of Stronghold 146 getting destroyed, the middle-aged man started talking about how that mysterious young supernatural being had utterly crushed the entire Zone Consortium's combat brigade. As the girl listened to the story, she wrote it down in her notebook. She wrote very fast, and the more she listened, the brighter her eyes became. She asked, "Is there really such a bold and powerful person in this world?" "He's not just bold and powerful." The middle-aged man sighed and said, "I was inside the manor of the Zone Consortium's third house at the time. I saw with my own eyes how he wrapped himself in steel armor and managed to dodge 3 RPGs. After that," at this point, the middle-aged man suddenly looked at Ren Xiaosu and said in surprise, "Have we met before?" The Zone Consortium had sketched a wanted portrait of Ren Xiaosu. Nearly all of the Zone Consortium's higher UPS had seen that portrait before. But as it was not the responsibility of this middle-aged man to catch Ren Xiaosu, he only took a quick glance at it. Now he felt a shocking sense of familiarity when he saw Ren Xiaosu. However, he could not recall where he had seen him before. Ren Xiaosu smiled and said, "I also fled here from the northwest. We might have met there before." "That's possible." The middle-aged man nodded. Next to him, the young woman urged, "You haven't finished the story yet. Hurry up and finish the rest of it." The middle-aged man was stunned. When he raised his head again to take another look at Ren Xiaosu, he realized he had already left. Ren Xiaosu did not want anyone to recognize him yet. He felt it would be better for him to keep a low profile now that he had arrived at the Central Plains. Although the Central Plains were prosperous, the undercurrents of this place should be similar to that of the Southwest and Northwest. He understood that although the war in the Central Plains had not yet begun, everyone already knew of the intentions of the consortiums here to fight for the Central Plains. He did not wish to get embroiled in these matters. Furthermore, the Pyro Company was here. The Central Plains was the home field of the Pyro Company. In this place, the Pyro Company would no longer be as easy to deal with as before. Ren Xiaosu suddenly realized the escapees were probably all former stronghold residents, and some of them were even formerly people of status. So then, why were there no refugees who escaped here as well? But Ren Xiaosu realized his thinking was wrong. The escapees could only be former residents of a stronghold. In fact, they would also have to be high-ranking officials linked with the Zone Consortium. The refugees in the northwest were very welcoming of Fortress 178. Once Fortress 178 arrived in the Zone Consortium's territory, they would definitely lower the refugees' taxes and improve their living conditions. So why would any refugee want to escape from there? In fact, they probably could not wait for Fortress 178 to arrive. As for the normal stronghold residents, they did not have to worry about the war affecting them at all. Only the high-ranking officials would worry about getting removed from the system. After all, during the time the Zone Consortium was in power, the high-ranking officials caused quite a lot of trouble for the stronghold's residents and refugees. Ren Xiaosu had been to many strongholds, so he knew the Zone Consortium's officials were definitely not any better than those from the Li Consortium, the Qing Consortium, or the Yang Consortium. At the thought of this, Ren Xiaosu cast aside his sympathy for the escapees. None of those who could come here despite their guilt would be good people. The waiter in the tavern pushed open the creaking wooden door. Ren Xiaosu got up and walked in. One of the more interesting stories about the Anjing house spoke about how the heir of a small consortium entrusted the Anjing house to assassinate his biological father in order to inherit the family business earlier. In the end, after a week, the Anjing house said they had completed the mission. However, the heir realized his father was not dead yet. Hence, he angrily accused the Anjing house of being untrustworthy. He had already paid the fee, but the Anjing house had broken their promise. The fee was equivalent to 5 or 6 years of his savings as the heir of the consortium, and it was a huge sum that normal people would never get to see in their lives. However, the Anjing house calmly replied to that consortium's heir, "You said you wanted your biological father killed. Your mother's bodyguard from more than 10 years ago, who's also known to you as Uncle Wang, has been killed. He's your actual biological father." Along with that reply, the Anjing House also sent a DNA paternity test report to the heir. The heir of the consortium was stunned. What kind of a fucking twist was this? He did not even know when the paternity test was done, much less how the Anjing House could have learned of such a secret. This heir apparent of the small consortium almost had a mental breakdown. Ren Xiaosu did not know whether this incident had really happened, but he was very interested in the ability of the Anjing House to find people. Furthermore, he had a long chat with the lumberjacks who tried to rob him yesterday and found out from them that there was even a rumor among the people that if you helped the Anjing House carry out a mission, you could choose not to be paid monetarily and get them to do something of equal value for you instead. However, all of this was just hearsay. After all, they were just some rumors the refugees had heard, so Ren Xiaosu understood well that these rumors were most likely fabricated. For example, there were now even rumors about him, the war hero of Fortress 178, being over 2 meters tall and not ever taking his eyes off his gun while sleeping. He was even known to be more inclined towards certain subjects. What the fuck did it mean to be more inclined towards certain subjects? Ren Xiaosu was perplexed. He could understand the basis of the other rumors, but who the fuck would spread rumors about him being more inclined in certain subjects at school? There was no fucking basis to that rumor at all. And what did that have anything to do with combat? After the tavern opened for business, he went inside and ordered 2 dishes. Then he noticed the young woman, who had gone around earlier taking notes as she listened to stories from the northwest, helping a blind old man towards a chair in the middle of the tavern. Ren Xiaosu understood now that this young woman was the granddaughter of this storyteller. The reason why she was just now asking people to tell their stories was so she could collect more material for her grandpa. Ren Xiaosu became even more interested in what tales the storyteller would weave. This was because, when the young woman was listening to the stories earlier, she would occasionally interrupt the middle-aged man to analyze the logic of what he said. Clearly, she was very particular about the veracity of the stories. When the young woman saw Ren Xiaosu, she greeted him with a smile. Meanwhile, the tale that the storyteller narrated today was about the war in the southwest, and the main character was Qing Zhen. In the story, there was also a supernatural being who acted as the Qing Consortium's spy and helped to bring down the Li Consortium's Divine Arms Battalion. Ren Xiaosu smacked his lips in satisfaction. Although he was no longer out there fighting wars, the legend of his deeds was still spreading to many places. Suddenly, Ren Xiaosu felt that even though he clearly did not wish to get involved in those disputes, it was as though everything that happened in the northwest and southwest were somehow related to him. Ren Xiaosu had come here because he wanted to listen to stories about the Anjing House, but he was not in a hurry to know. If this topic wasn't touched on today, he was fine with coming back again tomorrow to listen. The storyteller would definitely talk about it someday. That night, after Ren Xiaosu left the tavern, he went to the grocery store closest to the stronghold to trade his gold for money. When he saw the owner of the grocery store, Ren Xiaosu felt as though he had seen Wang Fugui again. It was just that this owner was not as benevolent as Wang Fugui. Ren Xiaosu decisively bought a brick house with the money he exchanged for, and it even came with a backyard too. Suddenly, the entire town was abuzz with news that a rich man had arrived. Every day, Ren Xiaosu did not do anything other than dumping corpses in the morning and going to the tavern to listen to the storyteller from noon until night. The storyteller would only tell 2 stories a day, while there would also be a preview of what would be talked about in the next session. The reason for dumping corpses was that his exchanging of gold for money had alarmed some of the ruthless people in town. When they saw that Ren Xiaosu was able to so generously afford a brick house, they started getting ideas to rob him. There were constantly people climbing over the wall of Ren Xiaosu's house in the middle of the night. However, all of them would always disappear after that like rocks sinking into the sea. These people were all very secretive in their actions. A lot of people only realized the ruthless people in town seemed to be lessening after they had been missing for a few days. At first, nobody thought much of it. Slowly, the atmosphere in town became much more peaceful when the ruthless people who often liked stealing from others started going extinct. There were also some ruthless people who sensed that something was amiss and decided to run away. They felt like someone was secretly hunting them down in this town. This rumor was spreading around the town: someone is purposely hunting down the ruthless lawbreakers. Initially, Ren Xiaosu still had to trade his gold for more cash. But after killing so many of the ruthless people, the money he had on hand started increasing instead of decreasing. Since Ren Xiaosu was not a good person either, he did not feel bad about spending this ill-gotten gains. And to his surprise, he found an old cell phone on one of the people. Although the cell phone was very basic and worn out, it was not enough to stop Ren Xiaosu's curiosity for new stuff. Ren Xiaosu had also seen an instructional manual for a cell phone from before the cataclysm in the Yang Consortium's library. However, he had never seen an actual cell phone before and only had experience using a satellite phone. The cell phone did not have a charger, and there was nowhere in this town where it could be charged. However, this problem did not stump Ren Xiaosu since he had the nanomachines. As he waited for the cell phone to finish charging to turn it on, a glimmer shone in Ren Xiaosu's eyes. This was the first time he had come across such a high-tech daily necessity. However, after studying it for a long time, Ren Xiaosu realized this device only had the functions of sending and receiving text messages, as well as taking pictures. But who would that refugee be sending messages to? The mailbox was empty, and so was the photo album. Or could it be that the refugee who had it previously was only holding onto it but had never used it before? He went outside and asked around. Some refugees said some of the Wang Consortium's big shots in the stronghold had been using cell phones for a long time now. Ren Xiaosu did not think too much about it and assumed the refugee had gotten it from robbing the escapees. As the number of people looking for trouble decreased, Ren Xiaosu was finally able to calm down. He started to concentrate on listening to all of the stories that were told, such as the Pyro Company secretly capturing supernatural beings, or the King He group in the Central Plains that had a method to create supernatural beings. As long as one could complete 8 mysterious challenges, they could unlock the genetic code to awaken their power. However, no one in the outside world knew what these 8 challenges were. Only Ren Xiaosu was listening attentively from the beginning till the end. Some of the customers beside him could not help but wonder who he was. This was because the spending level at this tavern meant that not anyone could come here just because they wanted to. Now that a rich man had suddenly appeared in town, everyone would definitely pay a little more attention to him. However, they realized Ren Xiaosu would just sit there alone and listen to the stories being told every day. He did not try to interact with them at all. The esquires in town were all thinking to themselves that he was probably some family member of the Zone Consortium that had escaped the war and that it was only a matter of time before his pockets were emptied. Ren Xiaosu listened to the stories every day, and his life became unusually peaceful. But one day, he received a text message on the old and worn-out cell phone he carried around. Stronghold 67, C rank. Takers, please reply. This text was very perplexing, so Ren Xiaosu did not bother with it. He was just using the cell phone as a camera, and he found it quite novel. Ren Xiaosu used the cell phone to take pictures of the beautiful sunset. When he saw the sumptuous lamb stew in the tavern, he took a picture of it as well. He thought that when he got reunited with Liu Yuan in the future, he could show him the pictures and let him know what the legendary lamb stews were like. The stew in the tavern was different from those sold at the market stalls in town. It was slightly more expensive but also had meat. After ordering the stew, the waiter in the shop would even give each customer 2 flatbreads and let them break it themselves. The easier they tore, the better. Some people said that if you didn't break the bread yourself, or if you didn't do it properly, the chef would secretly spit in your stew. On this day, Ren Xiaosu came to the tavern and realized the storyteller was not there. Curious, he asked the waiter, "Where's the storyteller?" The waiter smiled and said, "You must not know since you're a new customer. The old man doesn't come here every day. He occasionally takes a break too, when depends on his mood." Ren Xiaosu thought to himself that this wouldn't do. He was looking forward to listening to more stories. Hence, he resolutely asked the waiter where the storyteller lived and went to knock on his door to make him go to the tavern to tell his stories. The old man was stunned as well. "Young man, I'm only in the storytelling business because I don't want to work in a factory. You showing up at my door now suddenly makes me feel like I'm back in the days when I was still working at the factory before I went blind." Ren Xiaosu felt a little embarrassed by his words. However, the old man sighed again and said, "When I heard that you were showing up at the tavern every day, I thought that it was because you were interested in my granddaughter. But now it seems like you just really want to hear my stories. Tell me then, what stories would you like to hear? We won't be going to the tavern today. After all, I might not tell the stories that you want to hear in front of so many people." The young woman next to him turned a little shy and hid back in her room. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu was stunned. He suddenly realized that although this old man had blindness of the eyes, his heart was not affected. This world was really a strange place. Some people were not blind, yet they could not see the truth of things. When Ren Xiaosu heard this, he did not bother hiding it anymore. He bluntly said, "Grandpa, I want to hear stories about the Anjing house." The storyteller smiled. "That's not something a normal person should hear about. Do you feel that I'm normal? You're right. You're not normal at all. I'll tell you then." Although the Anjing house had not been established for that long, it was an exceptionally mysterious organization since its inception. Their extraordinary strength was not self-proclaimed. In all these years, there were indeed no missions the Anjing house could not accomplish. Only the world's best hitmen could get a chance to join the Anjing house. Not only would the Anjing house assign missions to these hitmen, but it would also ensure their safety and provide them with facilities. That yarn about the Anjing house killing the biological father of the heir of a small consortium, the one about that Uncle Wang, did it really happen? Ren Xiaosu asked curiously. It was a real incident. The storyteller nodded with a smile. So does it mean that by completing a mission for the Anjing house, I can get them to help me do something of equal value? For example, to help me find someone? Ren Xiaosu asked. Yes. The storyteller smiled and said, "So you're not looking to have someone killed for you but just looking for a person instead?" "If I want to kill someone, I can do that myself," Ren Xiaosu said calmly. A certain aura of arrogance belied the way he spoke. But the storyteller did not take it to heart. He only sighed. Times have indeed changed. Ren Xiaosu asked again, "Do you think that the Anjing house is a good organization or an evil one? I'm not trying to judge them or something, but since I need their help to find some people, I have to at least know if they are dependable." Ren Xiaosu was worried he might end up compromising Wang Fugui and the others' safety by getting the Anjing house to look for them. The storyteller thought for a moment and said, "All these years, the Anjing house has always had a very clear criteria for the people they kill, and their targets were also deserving of death. Many of them are the radical members of the main factions in various consortiums, while the important figures of the conservative factions are usually protected through missions that seek to kill hitmen who target them. However, due to the extremely high price of that, the Anjing house has rarely handled such missions personally in recent years." "They don't personally handle the missions? Then who do they get to do it?" Ren Xiaosu was stunned. "They hire some of the hitmen who are waiting for the trials." The storyteller smiled and said, "The Anjing house dispersed a bunch of cell phones a few years ago, and it's said that the phones can only send and receive text messages and take pictures. The purpose of sending and receiving texts is for the Anjing house to issue missions and wait for interested hitmen to accept them. The mission details include the mission rank and hitman rank that can accept it. As for the camera, that's necessary for taking pictures of the body after the mission's been completed. The pictures are automatically sent to the Anjing house." When Ren Xiaosu heard this, he was absolutely taken aback. Cell phones. Cell phones that could only send and receive text messages and take pictures as well? Using text messages to take on missions, and the missions are even ranked? Didn't he have one just like that in his hands? However, the old man said that after taking a picture, the cell phone would automatically send it over to the Anjing house. Ren Xiaosu recalled the lamb stew in his photo album and suddenly fell deep into thought. The people at the Anjing house probably did not think they would receive a photo like that either. Haha, how magical, Ren Xiaosu laughed awkwardly. The old man continued, after completing a series of missions, you can rise from D rank to A rank. Only then will you be qualified to participate in the formal trials to join the Anjing house. Ren Xiaosu suddenly wondered, Grandpa, how do you know about all this? Normal people don't tell others these stories, right? So how true is all of that? The storyteller paused for a moment, then said with a smile, how do you think I lost my eyesight?